not just for the wealthy, it's for the ones in need. It's power for the powerless to help them to succeed. And I'm proud to use BCH today, where freedom lights the way. Fast, secure, and built to last, the strongest every day. From the seas to the farmlands, to the mountains capped with snow, Bitcoin Cash connects the world and helps our future grow. Yes, Bitcoin Cash connects us all and helps our future grow.
There will be no real non-controlled currency in the world.
We're coming for you, banks.
Listening to different podcasts, like in a whole different reality, which they think completely different things about Bitcoin.
They have got my money in their banking system. I should be able to access it, right?
Apple is live.
There's a good number of fucking, like, pretty smart Bcashers.
And we're live.
Hello and welcome back to the Bitcoin Cash podcast. Following Bitcoin Cash on its rise to global reserve currency, this is episode number 139, Earthbucks and Rehabilitating Lost Bitcoiners, featuring Ryan X. Charles. Today is Saturday, the 4th of January, 2025. I'm your host, Jeremy. Jet is doing the producing, same as usual. Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome back in 2025. New year, new intro. Everyone seemed to enjoy that when I premiered it on the 1st of January. So we're off to a good start. First things first, before we get into the show, Jet, did you have a good Christmas?
Yeah. I mean, I did spend a good chunk of Christmas like sick, but I had a good time. I saw a lot of family still waiting on my brother to get up to see me. Drew, if you're listening to this, TikTok, buddy, come on, what are you doing? But it was a blast. Ate way too much food.
Got some good Christmas presents?
Not really, but I did get some cool learning experiences. So I got my girlfriend some beer brewing kit, and she's not going to put the effort into brewing the beer. But I'm all down for that. Well, no, she'll drink the beer. I'm not a beer drinker. But I'll get the fun of brewing it. I'll take it.
And did you gift anyone Hijacking Bitcoin?
I don't know anyone personally that reads anymore.
Okay. Fair enough. Ryan, how was your Christmas and your New Year?
Yeah, totally great. I mean, for New Year, I did nothing whatsoever. So I go to sleep really early, as we were just talking about before we started here. And so I woke up, I think, at like 1 a.m. on New Year's Day. So that's how early I went to sleep and how early I woke up again. That's sort of unusual, but yeah, pretty good. Perfectly ordinary Christmas. No interesting gifts or anything like that, but perfectly pleasant experience. So.
Amazing. Well, I am charged up for the new year. Let's check in on the price. BCH versus shitcoins, I titled it this week because there's a lot of trash that is bumping into the top 20 right now. But your mileage may vary. USD $473.33 per 100 megasats, which is up. 1 BTC sat buys 206.7 BCH sats, so we're up slightly on the ratio there. 1 ETH buys 759.8 megasats, which is down slightly. And this year, I've premiering that we're going to have some new stats every week or every episode as well too. Selene, 30-day users, 786 users, and the Tokenaut TVL says that we're at 18,435. BCH. Okay, our guest today is Ryan X. Charles, a cryptocurrency engineer, EBX creator, formerly at BitPay, Reddit, Yours, Money Button, and a bunch of other stuff as well, actually. Even for the standard of guests on this show, he has been involved in a lot of things in Bitcoin history, actually. So I'm fascinated to hear his story. Welcome to the show, Ryan. How do you get into Bitcoin?
Yeah, thank you very much. I was happy to be here, Jeremy. Really excited to talk with you guys. I was involved in Bitcoin Cash pretty heavily for a while, so it's kind of exciting to dip my toes back in the whole Bitcoin Cash world again. If your question is how I got involved originally, it was actually in 2011. I was a physicist at WashU in St. Louis, and I used to read Hacker News every day, which is news.ycombinator.com. And there was an article.
They hate Bitcoin, right? They
hate Bitcoin. I was after finding one article on Hacker News, I was shadow banned shortly thereafter because they're not very Bitcoin friendly. But I did find it on Hacker News, and for me, I'm just sort of a highly technical person. I'm like, wow, decentralized money. Like, to me, it clicks every box in my sort of world of things that I'm interested in. So the idea of how it could work technically to, have some type of money that doesn't just rely on some trusted elite somewhere was astounding to me. So I went down the rabbit hole and never came back. I've been involved from then until now.
So do you have any, you say that it's what drew you into it, but for a lot of the listeners who now it's 2025, right? And we've been accumulating listeners from all the different generations of Bitcoin, and in Hijacking Bitcoin and also in my sort of summaries of it, I kind of feel like everyone draws the OG line where it puts them just inside it, but the period between 2009 and the collapse of Mt. Gox, I feel like was sort of that was a very different time in Bitcoin's history. So I'm wondering if you have any reflections on that initial starting point.
Yeah, no question. It absolutely depends on sort of the era, because what many of us learned from that era, and I think that if you meet other people like Roger Ver being one of them, but there's not too many others because it was pretty small, but there are others. It was obvious that we were going to raise the maximum block size. That I would never have gotten involved if I thought we were going to permanently cap the maximum block size at 1 megabyte. Like, that's never going to work. That's not going to happen. So to me, that's the most striking thing that always comes out. At that time, in 2011, that was the plan. No one promoted the idea that we're supposed to leave it permanently capped at 1 megabyte. And that was one of the things that dramatically changed from then until 2017. New people came in, and propaganda, as the book Hijacking Bitcoin covers, people literally created propaganda promoting this idea of small blocks. And somehow that idea won out. And so it's actually a completely different culture. What people think of Bitcoin today is very, very different than what Bitcoin was at that time.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I always struggle to explain to people, because how it happened was not that people changed their mind, but the growth in the scene changed it. So it was like at a certain time, it was 99% or 99.999% that all believed in large blocks, and that they didn't change their mind, or a couple of them did, but most of them didn't. It was just that the scene grew, and all the new people flooding in as the community, 10x to 100x in size, they got all blasted with the propaganda, and they never heard sort of a good argument, a good accounting of the original side. And we're still seeing the ramifications of that today. Like, it's almost unbelievable that they would have seen so much evidence that exactly what the big blockers basically said, or a lot of it, all came to pass. Except that the price went up, and that just overrules every other correct prediction in the minds of so many people. It's truly an insight into human psychology. I've found watching it happen.
That's 100% correct. It grew a lot, so in some sense that's good, great. But that's exactly what happened. That because people started creating small block propaganda, that's what all the new people saw. So they have no idea that the culture was completely different. That's what happened.
And I also think it's interesting in hindsight, because then shortly after we kind of had coronavirus in 2020, and to me, it was like I'd seen it all. It was all happening a second time, but on an even larger larger scale. So that's just two experiences in my life that have changed the way I view humanity forever. That's absolutely for sure. Okay, so let's get out of the OG days a little bit. And then you worked at BitPay. I had actually no idea about that until I was reading up before the show. Tell me about that. How did that come about?
Oh yeah. So let me talk about BitPay for a minute. So I can't wait to talk with Jason Dreisner again, who I'm sure he's going to, if he watches this episode or something, but if I get involved in Bitcoin Cash, because when I joined BitPay in 2013, he was already there. But I think if he'll probably, he can back me up on this, but when I joined, I was actually the first employee to accept my full salary in Bitcoin. And I think if Jason remembers, I think he decided to do that after I did it. So I think that I was actually technically the first. So this was and that was a really cool time to join BitPay in 2013 because we had this small team. I think when I joined, it was I was like employee number 15 or something like that. So pretty small. And so we had a very tight, strong culture and we grew very quickly. Throughout the course of the next year, we grew dramatically. But that was really fun. We were all very passionate. We all worked really hard, all day, every day. Jason and I and a few other engineers were there like 12 hours a day, every day. It was exciting.
Now, as we've seen, how things played out, like I remember them, it was sort of BitPay and Coinbase were the two big companies, that were really pushing that merchant payment processing, etc., and a little bit blockchain.info, which is now blockchain.com. But between those two, BitPay and Coinbase, they were sort of the shining lights in that early phase of the merchant rollout. But Coinbase is now staggeringly huge, and BitPay kind of seems to have got a bit lost along the way there. That's my observation. Do you have any thoughts on that aspect of it?
Many thoughts. So yeah, first of all, I think your assessment is correct. At that time, there just weren't very many Bitcoin companies at all. It was basically Coinbase and BitPay. And I think Mt. Gox collapsed in late 2013. So soon after I joined BitPay, they were gone.
2014, it went offline. But
so late 2013. Yeah, totally. So that was while I was working at BitPay. And I think there was one other company, I can't remember the name of it right now. They got taken out for money laundering or something like that. I don't quite remember what the name of that company was right now.
BitInstant, Charlie Shrem.
I think that's it. Yeah, Charlie Shrem's company, BitInstant. That's right. Yeah, he ended up. Yeah, well, I don't remember the story clearly. I won't try to re-explain it. But the point is, there were not very many companies. There were a bunch of small projects, but BitPay was one of the only venture-funded companies at that time. Now, in 2013, I think it started to grow more, or in 2014, it started to grow more. But in 2013, it was extremely small. And I think just because you compare BitPay and Coinbase together, in hindsight, I think Coinbase was a little bit more practical and less ideological. I think Coinbase, because they just let people buy and hold it, they were okay with being a custodian. BitPay was kind of anti-custodian. They were more on the self-custodial side. Coinbase embraced just let ordinary people buy it and hold it in Coinbase. And that won out because that's what a lot of people do. They go to Coinbase, they buy it. A lot of people don't do anything with it, but Coinbase is number one for that sort of thing, at least in the US and presumably in many other countries as well, that people buy it and hold it on Coinbase. And that's something that BitPay just didn't really do. At least I don't know what their full business is today, but at the time they weren't doing that sort of thing at all.
Okay. And then would you put a lot of stock in them sort of today? I feel like their impact, if they suddenly said they were going to make some big industry moves or something, I just feel like they're, in a much bigger sea at this point.
For sure. I think Coinbase is still one of the largest and most important companies in the space. And I have to say, I don't mean this to be offensive to the BitPay people, but I'm just not even frankly aware of what they're actually doing right now. I'd have to go research it. They're not at the top the way that Coinbase is. So yeah, that's just how it is. I'm sure they've grown a lot just because to stick around all this time. But yeah, I can't compare them to Coinbase today. At the time, they were arguably number two, if not even, you could even argue number one in 2013. But today, they're certainly nowhere near that anymore.
Yeah, that's just always something that's fascinated me because, yeah, from my point of view, they were fairly equivalent, but then the outcome is just enormously different. So it was clearly something, a lot going on that I was not aware of or couldn't predict. And then you also worked at Reddit, which was before the block size war kicked into effect, I believe, but another company that's very different now to how it was then. Any reflections on that?
Oh, there's many reflections. This is one of those stories where I'll give you the brief version, but there's so much we could do full 2 hours.
Yeah, not 2 hours, but the semi-longer version. Let's not skip too many of the juicy details.
Yeah, so what happened was I actually moved to San Francisco in early 2014 for BitPay, and then basically got contacted by Reddit because the guy who was the CEO of Reddit at the time, his name was Yishan. Yishan wanted to do a cryptocurrency project. And so they got in touch with me, and I ended up joining Reddit in, I think it was September of 2014. And on day one, it seemed like a very optimistic project. Like, how is Reddit going to use cryptocurrency? This is a very exciting idea because it's bigger than it was then. But even at the time, it was a major social network that was very popular. And to integrate cryptocurrency in some way was a huge legitimate, it made cryptocurrency seem legitimate for Reddit to be doing something like that. So it was very exciting, and there was a lot of potential. Unfortunately, drama subsequently ensued immediately after I joined Reddit, and the CEO resigned 2 weeks after I joined. For reasons that sort of had nothing to do with cryptocurrency. In hindsight, I think he announced that he was just exhausted and couldn't do it anymore. You'd have to go back in and look up his posts on Reddit and things like this from way back then in that year, 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago now. But after he resigned, I was sort of rudderless, I guess you could say, within the company because nobody else really cared that much about cryptocurrency. So I just kept working there for a few months. A woman named Ellen Powell became CEO of Reddit. And then her whole tenure was swept up in a bunch of other drama that had nothing to do with me and nothing to do with cryptocurrency. But it was being in this weird Silicon Valley drama and working at Reddit was just truly bizarre. And I kept trying to I was going to build a Bitcoin wallet for Reddit. I was writing software. In fact, last I checked, I haven't checked in a long time, but there was a project called Full Node on Reddit's GitHub page that might still be there. I'd have to go double check, but it was there for a long time. They didn't delete it. That was my software that I wrote at Reddit that was going to be the Reddit wallet. But that was just my idea because once Yishan left, it was just impossible to make headway doing anything with cryptocurrency because the new leadership was Ellen Powell, and there was a guy, I don't remember his name right now, but the leadership was too busy doing other things. There was no way they were going to do a cryptocurrency project. And so I was laid off in, I think it was January of 2015. So I guess that's almost exactly 10 years ago.
As it was heating
from
up.
here.
Yeah. As it was sort of the run into the block size war was kind of underway. I mean,
I have to add something. Yeah. So on the block size war, yes, this was before that. But here's one funny anecdote. Because I worked at Reddit, and this was a big deal for cryptocurrency, all of the crypto people started reaching out to me, and they wanted to partner with Reddit somehow. And that included Blockstream, who, when they reached out to me, had not yet even formally announced that they had created a company. But they reached out to me and I met them. And I actually ended up going to Blockstream's inauguration party in late 2014 in Los Gatos, California. And I met Greg Maxwell a number of times. And this is when I met Greg Maxwell, and he was by that point promoting the idea that, well, yeah, because of the maximum block size, we're going to have to do side chains. We have to do. I'm like, and I got cold chills at what this guy was saying. I'm like, what do you mean we're going to do side chains? We're going to just raise the maximum block size, right? I thought that was the plan. And it was coming from Greg Maxwell. I'm like, oh my God, this guy is serious. Like, he actually thinks that we're going to leave the 1 megabyte maximum block size in place forever. And now you're making a whole business on this idea of side chains as though we're stuck with the 1 megabyte block size limit. And the only way is to invent some completely different thing. So that was at a time when Greg Maxwell in particular, Blockstream as a company, and various other people like Luke Jr. had started to actually promote the idea that it was impossible or a bad idea to remove the 1 megabyte maximum block size, and that we needed to do something completely different.
Man, that's crazy. That's why I love whenever we have somebody on the show who's been around a long time. I love just getting all these little anecdotes, because the whole story of Bitcoin is as distributed as every other part of it. Probably more so, to be honest. I've never heard anything like that. Do you have any reflections on the psychology maybe of Greg Maxwell, long known to use so many Reddit shill accounts? You know, he's been caught multiple times replying to his own posts, you know, trying to back them up and then pretend it's not him, and like etc. The amount of social engineering he has tried to do directly himself, not even like, you know, potentially hiring some bots or anything like that, is crazy once you look into it.
100%. So what people don't realize today is when you're using Bitcoin today, you're using Greg Maxwell's Bitcoin, not Satoshi's Bitcoin. That's how big the difference is. Greg Maxwell promoted a completely different vision for what Bitcoin is, that if you just read Satoshi, it's like, this just doesn't add up. What they're saying today is not what Satoshi was saying back then. So in terms of his psychology, another sort of moment in history was when Brian Armstrong the CEO of Coinbase, went to an event in Mexico, I think it was Mexico, with the core developers. And he came back from that event and he wrote an article that says, we have a problem, guys. The Bitcoin core developers are absolutely obsessed with a level of perfection that is unrealistic, and this is not going to work. And it was after that point that I think Coinbase wisely and correctly started pivoting away from a primarily Bitcoin company to a cryptocurrency company that was open-minded about alternative coins, whatever. I don't remember the history of which ones happened first or whatever, but they started doing other things and they started hedging out of Bitcoin. Again, in hindsight, with absolutely correctly, because the whole Greg Maxwell idea of we need the perfect cypherpunk vision is a idea that is incompatible with entrepreneurship. You cannot accept perfection because there is no such thing as perfection in reality. That's an idea that exists inside Greg Maxwell's head. And only someone who's not an entrepreneur, not a CEO, would be promoting the ideas that Greg Maxwell was saying. And so history bifurcated. You kind of had the whole cryptocurrency emerge because they were enabled by the complete inability of Bitcoin to solve any of the problems that mattered in the Bitcoin world. And it was two things. I want to add one more piece that I've had a lot of time to reflect on. In my humble opinion, it actually goes back to Satoshi Nakamoto. For Satoshi to add the maximum block size and then leave the project is what enabled Greg Maxwell to come in and start promoting these other ideas. I actually think it goes back to Satoshi. Satoshi did not do a good job handing off the reins of the Bitcoin project. He should have either stayed around, and I don't know who Satoshi is. He might have died, who knows? Maybe he had no choice. But to leave and to let whoever was around to grab power is why we're in the situation we're in now. And Greg Maxwell found a leadership gap and filled it with what, in my opinion, and I don't think lowly, I think he probably is doing what he believes in, but I think his ideas are worse than Satoshi Nakamoto's ideas. But he filled the leadership gap. Him and Luke Jr., like it or not, they were essentially the technical leaders of Bitcoin at that time. There were other people, but it was obviously for the reasons you said, Jeremy. Greg Maxwell is the one going out there creating boatloads of fake accounts on Reddit and creating actual propaganda in favor of his ideas. He really shifted the narrative. It was really Greg Maxwell. And that was only possible because Satoshi Nakamoto left a leadership gap that he filled.
Yeah, I mean, that whole incident of the blocks as getting introduced initially, obviously one of the most consequential moments in Bitcoin history. I kind of have to laugh a little bit at that because it just goes to show that Satoshi was human. It's like he only made one fucking mistake. Like that was literally it. And
exactly.
Nothing else needed to be changed. Bitcoin was 100%. A roaring success. And people... Also, in hindsight, I've talked about this before on the show, don't really kind of get it. that with Bitcoin, it's Satoshi was kind of in the position like if Elon had to launch a rocket to Mars and he had one rocket, and if that blew up, that was it. It was all over. You know, I don't know, everything got shut down, no second rocket, no relaunching, no whatever. Like Elon blew up like 5 rockets just getting them to go up and like come down or whatever, you know, however many different rockets it took. But Satoshi only got one chance to put the parameters in, put the narrative out there. And now, of course, as we've seen with everybody else launching their 1,000 different things, the whole immaculate conception thing that the BTC guys bang on about is basically a narrative that they tell themselves to pump themselves up. But there is some truth to it in that there was only one initial chance to get a sort of fair distribution into people who weren't valuing it for the fact that they were trying to scam everyone else and so forth, right? So I just think that
imagine if when Elon launched that rocket, the comparison is something like, imagine they did everything 100% precisely correct, but they forgot to put the fuel in the tank and they only had 1/10 of a tank of gas or something. I was like, oh, the one thing. That's the one thing. We did everything else right. That's a perfect analogy, I think.
But then, you know, in hindsight, it just comes back to like how good Satoshi was. You know, it's like
absolutely
it didn't fuck up on anything else. You know, it was just this one thing which he didn't even want in there.
And honestly, let me add to that. You know, something people gloss over today, but Satoshi did change Bitcoin a few times early on, and that would not have been a fatal problem if not for the fact that he left and no one had the power to remove it. If he had just removed it himself, that would have been okay. So it wouldn't have been as big a problem as it was, except that it was just a permanent cap with not only no software way to get rid of it, but no social way. There was no organization put in his place. There was no leader chosen. People say Gavin Andresen, but yeah, he was sort of, and I don't remember the full history right now to know exactly what role, but it is true that he is the closest thing to a leader. But Gavin wasn't as good or as driven or whatever, or as correct as Satoshi was. Gavin started giving power to people. He gave other people commit access. And then, you know, Gavin ultimately left. He just didn't lead the project in the way that it needed to be led. And so we were just stuck with it, and we're stuck with it to this day. And people, I mean, it's just so I still haven't gotten over it. I don't know if I'll ever get over it, but it's like people to this day, they're just absolutely convinced that the 1 megabyte block size limit is some sort of, necessary parameter. No, it isn't.
And then let's say, like, you know, we've had Hijacking Bitcoin. This is jumping forward a bit. We'll cut back on the timeline in a second. But Hijacking Bitcoin in 2024 was my most prominent story, I thought, in the crypto industry last year. Well, what do you make of that? Like you say, everybody believes that even just that book, The Right Thing at the Right Time, has done seemingly a huge amount to unwind this lies about the block size and everything that goes with it, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I haven't, until you said it that way, I didn't really think about it like that. But yeah, I was very pleased to see. So I know Roger Ver and Steve Patterson. I'm not close friends or something, but I do know them from that era and have been around, sort of the same. I have to admit, I have not read the book. The reason why I bought it and I haven't read it because I'm like, it brings back so many old memories. I just couldn't I'm like, I don't want to go through all this stuff again. But for that reason, I'm also sure it's correct because I know them and I absolutely know that they have the same view of things that I do. I'm sure it's a correct book. For Roger to go on Tucker Carlson is absolutely amazing. So the fact that they put that together, I'm so happy they did. I talked about doing something like that and never did it. They did it. They wrote the book that needed to be written and put that story out there so that people getting in today can go learn the other side of the story that you're not going to hear from anywhere else. You're not going to hear it from Michael Saylor and these people. So anybody investing in Bitcoin today, they should read that book. You need to be aware of the other side that no one who's just promoting Bitcoin BTC is going to be telling you, but you need to know the full story there. I think it's huge. I think it's a big deal. I feel really bad that Roger Ver is having all these problems with whatever he's dealing with right now. that have nothing to do with the book. Hopefully, I don't know I don't know the full background there, but maybe it does have something to do with the book, but I don't know. But either way, he got on Tucker Carlson anyway. The book is out there. The message is out there. You can argue, I think the truth is on our side, meaning the side that we were never supposed to have a permanent 1 megabyte block size limit. I think the truth is obviously on our side. Anybody can read Satoshi and understand that what the vision was. It's not ambiguous. So yeah, maybe things will change with time. And I think that, I'm extremely bullish on the cryptocurrency industry as a whole. Bitcoin Cash in terms of price is behind Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is just permanently hobbled in a way that Bitcoin Cash is not. So keep building it. There's still hope for Bitcoin Cash. I think Bitcoin is done. Bitcoin BTC, even if the price keeps going up, the idea that it's ever going to be used as electronic cash is just, they have dug themselves into such a deep hole. I don't know how that's ever going to happen. So yeah, that's another story, but I'm very bullish on the industry as a whole. And I think Bitcoin Cash is a major player in the new emerging industry. But I will say there are other cryptocurrencies that I'm open-minded. I used to be more of a maximalist than I am now. I'll put it that way.
Okay, so just to carry forward the timeline a little bit. So we had the block size war. Okay, I don't know if you want to throw in anything more about that. And then it gets to the BCH split and that kind of initial divergence era. Any thoughts on that? Yeah,
let's talk about, because in my career and trajectory, both of those points were extremely significant and, moments that deserve a lot of reflection and all this. Just to finish the one from 2017 when Bitcoin Cash was created. In hindsight, I was uneasy about Bitcoin Cash doing the replay protection and creating a new name. In hindsight, that was a mistake because the Bitcoin Core people have no more right to the name Bitcoin than the Bitcoin Cash people do. But Amari Sachet gave them the name. That could have worked. Unfortunately, it didn't work because what you now have is all these people buying Bitcoin Core. Again, this is Greg Maxwell's version of Bitcoin. This isn't what Satoshi Nakamoto was talking about. And they think it's Bitcoin. And so they've been able to use this brand and build on the brand Bitcoin and this sort of name recognition in a way that Bitcoin Cash has been unable to leverage. Maybe a little bit, it's Bitcoin Cash. But everybody, you don't confuse them. They're listed as two different assets on the exchanges. Nobody calls Bitcoin Cash Bitcoin anymore. I don't see people going Bitcoin. I mean, maybe some people are saying it's the real Bitcoin, but most people just call it Bitcoin Cash, BCH. That's just what it's called now. There's no reason. This is no less Bitcoin than the other one is. And the name has turned out to be very, very significant because, frankly, what you have are a huge number, at least 99%, of people buying Bitcoin today have no idea what they're buying. They're buying it on the name. And that has dramatically altered history because they're buying the one that you can't use. And they don't know, and they're never going to know the full details because they have lives and they're busy and they're not going to know all this stuff. They're buying the wrong one. They're buying the one that's not useful. So I think one of my takeaways was I thought that was a mistake at the time to add replay protection and give it a different name. I now think that that made it possible for Bitcoin Core to take over in a way that wouldn't have. It put all the big blockers on the Bitcoin Cash side and took the name away from us and made it impossible to defend that we were Bitcoin moving forward and just gave the name to the Bitcoin Core people.
All right, I'm gonna take the other side of this one.
Sure.
think the opposite. I think the opposite reason probably, for the reverse scenario, which is the most important thing is that we're here in 2025 and we have BCH at all. If you don't have replay protection, maybe it still goes bad. You just get completely wiped and that's it. It's game over. So I think in hindsight, even if it meant sacrificing the brand just on that, which I don't believe it probably did because it was a close run either way. It was very, very tight. And I don't know that adding replay protection or not having replay protection, which would have massively amped up the amount of confusion. I don't know. Maybe that's what you're saying would have been good about it.
That's fine. No,
get to the bottom of it.
I think that's a perfectly valid perspective. And what you're saying is true in that we do have Bitcoin Cash today. And so we have one that's actually working. So I think that's a completely valid point. Yeah, you could say, I mean, I would just say that speaking as an entrepreneur, the reason why that matters a lot, though, is that what Bitcoin Cash didn't have is anywhere near as much growth as Bitcoin has had. So I acknowledge your point, and it is good that Bitcoin Cash, is around today. And maybe the not adding replay protection simply would have failed. I don't know what would have happened. It's an alternate reality that I can't say. So who knows? I think you're looking on the bright side there, and that's valid. It does exist. It is useful today, and we still have a chance. We can put it that way.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you have the split. BCH is moving along. What then what happened? Through until BSV.
Yeah. Let me add. Yeah. Let's just the next year, because I sometimes describe 2018 as the worst year of my life, because what happened for me was I raised money in late 2017 from two companies, Bitmain, number one, InChain, number two. What happened was they were friends in late 2017, and then throughout 2018, they became bitter enemies. And so my investors were on what would become polar opposite sides of this Bitcoin Cash drama that occurred in late 2018. Now, at the time, bear in mind, I believed Craig Wright was Satoshi Nakamoto. So a lot of my reasoning was siding with Craig, thinking it's the original protocol. We want to say Satoshi himself is telling us it's the original protocol. What I now know in hindsight was, man, this dude is just a psycho, because he was going around creating drama with everyone, making it impossible for people to work anywhere around Craig Wright. So I really blame Craig ultimately for all the drama that occurred in that year. It was him that created all the problems. In any case, leading up to 2018, I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do, because my company depends on Bitcoin Cash. We made yours.org, which was a social network with Bitcoin Cash payments. We pivoted to make Money Button, and we launched Money Button in, I think it was either September or October of 2018. And then the split between what would become Bitcoin SV and Bitcoin Cash happened in November. So we had like 1 month launching this new product immediately before this drama in Bitcoin Cash. And about 2 weeks before the split, I still wasn't sure the split was actually going to happen. I'm like, come on, guys, you can't be serious. You are after 1 year after the split with Bitcoin Core, you're seriously going to do a hash war again and split again? We're taking what was a tough situation and making it dramatically harder. And so unfortunately, the split did actually happen again. You had this ridiculous hash war where they actually went to war with each other. You had Bitmain and Bitcoin.com basically on one side, and then InChain on the other. And I feel like there was one other party. I can't now remember. Maybe they merged or who knows. In any case, it was basically InChain on the other side, which was Calvinaire. All the money comes from Calvinaire funding all this. And they literally had a hash war, and Bitcoin SV lost in terms of the amount of hash power, but both chains continued to exist. And I decided to go with the Craig Wright side, because I'm like, look, we are the ones that didn't change the protocol. Bitcoin Cash, I forget the details right now, but there were other changes that Bitcoin Cash made. And I'm like,
and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, that stuff. And so I just decided to go with the one that didn't change. But I was extremely damaged, let's say psychologically, financially. I mean, we were like, man, we were at truly rock bottom at that particular point in time. Now, my company would go on to have some modest success in Bitcoin SV. And this, again, is a long story. But I sold the company in 2020, because by 2020, so less than 2 years later, it became pretty clear that Bitcoin SV was not growing. And I still thought it was likely that Craig was Satoshi Nakamoto. But what was undeniable by 2020 was that BSV is just not happening. Like, it's just not growing. We're not getting users. The ideas aren't working. It doesn't matter if Craig's Satoshi if we have no users, right? So it just wasn't working. And I'm like, I got to get out of this somehow. And so fortunately, I was able to sell the company in 2020. And for me, began what in hindsight is a long process of unwinding my mind about everything that happened up to that point, because I now realize, holy shit, that guy, Craig Wright, is a true psychopathic liar. He created a cult. He was not Satoshi Nakamoto. This was all a web of lies. He caused tons of people to lose money. You might hate Calvinaire, but no one lost more money than Calvinaire. Man, Craig Wright is insane. This guy, he lied to everyone about everything. And so anyway, I had to like unwind my mind and realize, oh my God, I was literally in a cult. What Craig Wright did was he created a literal actual cult that 100% in every way matches the definition of a cult. And the only difference was I didn't live in his house with him. So that's about the only thing that was not and I didn't live in his house. But a lot of people live in Slack with him, right? It's sort of a distributed cult. He's a cult leader. And so that process took a while. And I didn't really fully understand until he lost the court case with Copa. Because it was when he actually went to court specifically on the identity question. Is he Satoshi Nakamoto or not? Until then, I still thought, come on, Craig, sign something. So use the keys. For him to not sign in court, it's like, well, there's no other explanation, man. The only reason why you even created these court cases was to drag out this lie for years and years and years and years and make people think maybe he's going to sign in court. That was his last chance. He didn't sign in court. Instead, what he did was he brought a bunch of fraudulent documents to court versus Copa. So it's like, okay, well, that's it. It's definitive now. The guy is just a psychopath. He's a liar. He wasted everybody's time and money. He's created all this drama. He probably damaged the big blocker movement more than Greg Maxwell because he created such bad vibes around everything. So anyway, since I went off and told a brief version of the whole 4-year-long story there. But yeah, in a nutshell, I chose Bitcoin SV. Fortunately, Bitcoin Cash, in hindsight, survived this drama. You could think of it, your bright side is where you extracted that lunatic from Bitcoin Cash and you survived and you're still around. So, in some sense, if Bitcoin Cash is the real Bitcoin, it keeps going on. It kept surviving all of this drama and just kept working this whole time.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I put a very high premium on, is that I always laugh whenever people are trying to post, say, oh, BCH is full of drama, or it's had, this price declines or anything like that, because to a naive observer, that's a bad thing. But when you actually think about it, that shows resilience. That's the opposite of, if it's still going after all this time and there's still people involved and there's still kind of a chance. Maybe I'm just an idealist at heart, but like that Dumb and Dumber meme. So you're telling me there's still a chance? I still just have that attitude. I'm like,
totally.
It's not over till it's over, baby. So we're still here,
100%.
Yeah, I want to just quickly shout out as well. When you were in that whole hash war, that is actually online. You can go and watch. If anybody listening to the show now, after the show, you can go and look up the videos of the hash war. There's this great stream. It's like about 8 or 12 hours. It's in 2 different parts that happened at the time, which you're on for quite a lot of it. And there's all these famous people from crypto history check in on it. There's loads of good jokes and banter, and everybody's watching as it all plays out live, and it's absolutely amazing. There's very few things in history pre-internet that you can go back and literally watch it all, how it all went down with people commenting in real time, and that's one of them, and it's absolutely an amazing moment. And actually, one of the things
your viewers should probably watch that. I'm not going to watch that.
Yeah.
To me, that I remember. Oh man.
But that was that stream. To give you credit, you you're on the wrong side of the argument. But what you do say several times is that with your company, you're running both. You're running BCH and BSV, and that's causing you all kinds of headaches. To what you were just saying, it's very clear that was on your mind.
Yeah, no, I mean, because to me, bear in mind, I was still a maximalist in this sort of, let's call it a Satoshi Nakamoto maximalist. And what I mean by that is there's not supposed to be millions of cryptocurrencies. This completely messes up the idea. You're supposed to have one because if you have money is a common medium of exchange. If you have 1 million different types of money, you don't have money. Money is one of them. And Bitcoin was designed to scale and have one. And we're not supposed to have 1 million. So all of my vision, all of my ideas, all of my business plans was wrapped up in that idea. And I was still trying very hard to hold on to that, just one of them. But it was that idea. And you could argue it both ways, because you could say, as you do, that Bitcoin Cash still exists. But the flip side, if I play devil's advocate, but also all of these other ones exist. And so we have whatever we have. But in any case, I was trying to bridge that. So for me, that was so stressful, trying to hold on to I was so invested in this idea of one of them, and it was literally breaking in two before my very eyes, right?
Yeah, and then so do you have any thoughts on, because then also on this show, and I actually didn't check what episode it was, but sometime last year when you did that first video being like, all right, Craig's a scammer and I figured it out and I'm done with this. We actually, you like literally posted it while we were live on air with one of our episodes, and we caught it and put it on the show and commented on it as it was literally happening.
Amazing.
So that's another little bit of history. If you're interested, you can go back and see.
I would like to see that one. I would love to hear your reaction to that. Yeah, that's cool. I didn't know that happened. That's cool.
Live at the time. But do you have any reflections on that? Like in the way that like Hodl and Nord like came out and said like, you know, good on you for coming through with all this and stuff, or just the public reaction was immense because you are one of, if not the only person to, so Joshua Hensley also to an extent, but you by far have been the most prominent person in that situation of saying like I got it wrong and etc.
Yeah, you know, I did that, and I was very loud. I'm very thankful that people in Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Cash all have thanked me for doing that. And I did it. I just frankly felt, number one, a moral obligation, because in 2018, I was pro Craig Wright. And I told people, guys, this guy is Satoshi Nakamoto. Don't you understand? And I promoted Craig Wright as Satoshi Nakamoto. And I did that up through 2020. So it's like, oh man, I was a part of this stupid scam. Like this guy went around creating havoc on all these people, and I'm fucking promoting this guy. That was a huge mistake. So it's like, I just have to, I mean, like there's just no moral alternative for me. I must simply speak up, accept my error. I was just wrong. It doesn't matter why, you know, I was wrong for whatever reason, but I clearly was wrong about this. I should never have promoted this guy. I clearly didn't do enough due diligence on him originally. I should have figured this out earlier. That was my error. I should never have promoted him. It's like the only thing I can do is I can't unwind 6 years or whatever of time, but the only thing I can do now is come out and publicly admit that I made a mistake. And fortunately, that did get enough traction to help some other people. Meaning I literally believe it's a cult. Number one, get people out of the cult. Stop supporting this guy. He's an actual psychopath. He's going to take you to prison with him if you don't leave. You have to get away. So number one, help the remaining cult members escape from the cult. And then just number two, do anything I can, share information, do whatever to help unwind any of the damage. Again, you can't unwind it, but anything that can be unwound to help with that by being public about it. That's number one. Number two, I also just don't want to be attached to that guy for the rest of my life. I don't want to be remembered as someone that was a Craig Wright cult member. I'm doing other stuff now. I need to start over and spend another 10 years, because for me, it's been from 2011 until now, right? I've been involved in Bitcoin. In some sense, I'm starting over now. I need to create a new career for myself and do something new. And I do not want to be forever attached to that guy. So, you know, number one is help cult members escape. Number two is like do anything I can to help anybody else who was damaged by Craig Wright. And then number three, just move on with my life and do something new.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, it is honestly quite impressive how much clarity you have about that. And it's certainly not an easy thing to do, especially on such a public issue over so many years with so many people that you know and are, you know, have had many debates with, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So honestly, truly hats off for that. You've done an amazing job. Before we get out of the last bits of the sort of the history section, I don't know if there's any other bits that you want to highlight or you think were important or relevant now or in hindsight, or you know, and like maybe who's your favorite? Maybe that's a bit of an unfair question, but do you have somebody who you think you would, you know, you're still super interested in, that you follow the most closely for their opinion, or I don't know, anything like that?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I'll tell you what, to acknowledge I was in a cult and followed a cult leader, I'm not so eager to run out and start following some other narcissist, right? As I joked about on Twitter, like yesterday or this morning or whatever. I mean, you know, so and as I think we'll get to, I'm creating my own blockchain now. Part of the reason for that is like, you know, I just can't, you know, there's many reasons, but part of it is like, okay, if I have my own vision, The reality is I can't speak for Satoshi Nakamoto. I'm not Satoshi, obviously. I can't speak for Satoshi's vision. I have my own vision. And as we may discuss soon, my vision is probably highly overlapping with Bitcoin Cash, highly overlapping with Satoshi, but it's not actually the same. I believe my incentives now are actually to make my own. So that's what I'm making my own blockchain, and I do not want people to follow me like a cult leader, okay? But I'm not going out there following somebody else either. So it's more like I see it as the briefest way I could cover this, the psychology of all this is, if you listen to Jordan Peterson, politics aside, forget about politics because he's a very political guy. If you listen to him, one of the things he says, if you just listen to his psychology lectures, you have to take responsibility for your own life. That's what I'm doing. It's not about following some leader. It's like there is no leader who I'm going to go out there and follow and pay attention to that one person or something like this. I'm just going to take responsibility for things on my own, make things my way, which includes in my vision two things, which again we'll cover. It's not just a new blockchain, but as we also may cover, how I plan to integrate with Bitcoin Cash as well as the rest of the ecosystem. But the point is, I don't think there is a leader. There is no one person I'm going to follow. I'm just going to take responsibility myself, as flawed as I am, obviously, but just do what I can to contribute to what I think is correct and just keep doing that and not go out there and follow some other narcissistic leader. Michael Saylor, just to throw out an example, who will not that guy.
Yeah, it wasn't a trick question or anything, but it's a good answer. It's just, I guess it just comes to my mind because having been through so much of it, it's interesting as the tides shift, who sort of rises into prominence, and especially people who've been around a long time and they've seen a lot of heroes rise and fall, different villains and different things. It's actually usually quite insightful for me to see, like, is there somebody that I'm not paying attention to that I need to be? It doesn't need to be the one, true answer, but everyone has their own view of who's important to listen to and who isn't, and Bitcoin, if anything, has the you are one of the leading. Yeah, really. I mean, you're clearly. That's the problem. I do. I can listen to my own podcast, but that's the thing. It's I still need, everyone needs inspiration from somewhere, right? So I'm out there, like, now I've started reading other stuff. I'm like, I know all the Bitcoin stuff. I need to find some ideas from this for somewhere else. But yeah, no, okay. Well, thank you.
Well, I'll just throw one other idea out there, which is I've been meaning to. I can't claim it. You can see some books in my background. My room is filled with books. I think if you want an idea or something, like if somebody were driven, read classic works of literature and stuff like that. Go to the greats of history. That's what I would say. Maybe there are some greats around today. Elon Musk is a very controversial figure. My humble opinion is that obviously Elon Musk is one of the greats of today. But he's so political today, you don't necessarily have to follow Elon. Look at the other great people of history. Learn from those people. That's what I would say. It doesn't have to be someone around today. Go to great works of literature and things like that.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Okay, we've got community comment of the week, just to wrap up this whole thing, but we've had a classic instance here, Dan Held on Twitter, giving his take on hijacking Bitcoin and the block size war, and his quote is, quote, Roger and co., including Craig Wright, wanted to hijack Bitcoin to make it better, in quotation mark, for payments, which no one was using it for. Bitcoin community said fuck off, and so they forked off. Market decided that the other counterfeit version of Bitcoin is near worthless. End quote. And the reason this is good, because it's not surprising that Dan Held is deluded about all this. Although technically, except for the bit about the hijacking and the counterfeit part, what he says is actually correct. In a sense, people were using it for payments, and that later got destroyed. But anyway, he's kind of got the gist of something real there. And then he got replied to by Thierry Baudet, who's the Dutch politician who we've mentioned before on the show because he was waving around hijacking Bitcoin in the Dutch parliament. And so he replied, Bitcoin was literally designed for payments, source bitcoin.org/bitcoin.pdf, which is of course the link to the white paper. And the reason that I wanted to highlight this, not only because it kind of summarizes where things are at in terms of people getting on the wrong track with propaganda and all this sort of stuff, is that Dan Held has about 700 and something thousand followers on Twitter, and Thierry Baudet has about 350,000. Now, Thierry Baudet is not somebody who's been in the mix this whole time. But he's come in the last 6 months or year, he's read Hijacking Bitcoin, he's figured out what's actually true, and like you said about being on the side of truth, he's doing a little bit of advocacy here that is sort of very big blocker-esque, not because he has any history with it whatsoever, but just because he's come to the same answer. And so I think this is a fascinating example of how heavy hitters are there aren't too many, honestly, on the big block side.
That's great. I wonder,
right?
I don't know who that guy is, but I just followed him on X as you're saying this. I'm like, okay, if he's some guy, I've never heard of him before, but he's obviously clued in. He's done his own research. He's got his own opinion. That's somebody I want to follow. So I wonder if, the thing is, we're still in a growth phase for, let's call it Bitcoin plus crypto. Where new people are coming in. Most people don't do any research. Okay. I've talked with a lot of people. I mean, when I try to argue with people about anything technical, if somebody new comes in, they don't care. Like, they're buying Bitcoin because the price is going up. Like, but but the price is going to keep going up. I mean, and I'm putting words in their mouth, but this is sort of how they act, and they truly don't care about many of these issues. But that just can't last forever. And there is an underlying truth here that's like, did you read the white paper? What white paper? The thing that the document that described what it is that you're buying, that you're investing all your money in, and it's obvious. It says it's a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. That's in the title. It's clearly electronic cash. What do you think that means? It's like cash, but electronic. It doesn't say digital gold, does it? It says electronic cash. What does that sound like it's supposed to be to you? So anyway, I wonder that's a great reason to be optimistic. Again, I don't know how long he's been involved in Bitcoin, but I'm going to optimistically hope he's some guy that has simply done his own research, has his own opinion, and that people that do that are sort of a light at the end of the tunnel, maybe, that there's still hope that the world will come around and understand what's going on here and pick the right one.
Well, he's this politician in the Netherlands, and he went to a BCH meetup. I don't know. Again, he somehow got involved in this whole a little while ago, and apparently, what he thought. I wasn't there, so I don't know, but the word was that he kind of was like, okay, yeah, this is all sort of making sense to me, but he still had a little bit of that, like, yeah, but I think, BTC is still the biggest, there's some way we can fix it, et cetera, right? And so I thought that's another good reason to highlight it, is because we've seen this pattern over and over with people who come in post-hijacking, is they kind of need to figure out that the hijacking is real for themselves, like they come in and they think, okay, everyone's told me, that Bitcoin's kind of screwed up and that it's slow and et cetera, but like especially non-technical people will come in because they think we just need to talk to the devs. If you've run a company or anything like that, a big organization, and you like, okay, we've got a problem in the engineering department. You're like, okay, this is the devs who've got the wrong idea, but let's get in there. We'll fire a couple of them. We'll get some new ones in, whatever we'll do, and we can kind of get past that sticking point. And that's the attitude. Like Kim.com famously also came into Bitcoin and got really interested in it. And there's videos of him being like, can't we all just work this out? And then what do you know, 12 months later, he's like, BCH is the real Bitcoin. BTC is hijacked and it's all fucked. Like, people need to touch the stove for themselves. So this kind of
I've got to play on what you're saying here. I love the way you put that. We've seen the same pattern over and over and over again. That's exactly right. And we're still seeing it because it's still not completely global yet. We're still in let's call it an awareness phase. We're in an awareness phase of increasing awareness globally. We're still in that phase. It's not done yet. So that pattern hasn't stopped yet. Right? People still need to go through that pattern. There's still going to be more new people that come in and go through that pattern of getting involved in Bitcoin, believing all this nonsense, and gradually waking up and realizing this just doesn't make any sense, and changing their mind about it. I think that's happening, and I think that's important just because that is a very important reason to think that things still could change, that Bitcoin Cash is still smaller, but Bitcoin Core simply doesn't make sense. There's just no way this is going to work. And their reasonings, because I'm just shocked. I'll just give you another example. I don't have the tweet on top, but there's another guy, since you're pointing out posts on X, Mason Borda, who's someone I used to work with at BitGo way back in the day. I worked with him 10 years ago. He commented to me, I mentioned Bitcoin Cash. He's one of the guys in the thread. And I said, I'm researching Bitcoin Cash today. He's like, why don't you use Bitcoin? You used to be an expert on Bitcoin way back in the day. And and could you just go and join Bitcoin again? And so I responded and I said, last I checked, the blocks are full on Bitcoin, aren't they? So in other words, I have to outbid anybody using Bitcoin to be able to use Bitcoin. So that argument is still happening in his head. He still hasn't switched over yet, but they're still saying stuff that makes, how am I supposed to use Bitcoin? There's literally no room. The only way to use it is to boot out somebody else that's currently using it. I can't use it. Don't you get it? But they think there's some magical solution, that there's some way to use it without using it. And I'm supposed to be responsible for figuring out how to use it without using it. And it's like they think I'm an idiot for not figuring out how to use it without using it. I think that's just total nonsense. You can't use it without using it. And I've argued before ad nauseum, but Lightning Network makes no sense. Their other solutions do not make sense. They're never going to work. You can't use it without using it. The only way to use it is to use it. You've got to have bigger blocks because that's what it means to use it. You have more transaction volume. Bigger blocks means you're using it more. So anyway, I could rant about this for 6 hours, but in a nutshell, my point is that the pattern continues to repeat and the same thinking is still there, but it's repeating and there's reasons to be optimistic.
Yeah. We'll get through to the end of it eventually. I hope. I guess I don't know, but we are slowly chipping away at it. And like you said, the truth tends to only flow in one direction is my kind of way of thinking. It's very hard to unlearn the truth. Let's put it that way. Like once you've got it, unconvincing someone or lying to them once they see through the bullshit is just almost more impossible than anything, right? It's hard. It's like that saying, what is it? It's easier to fool a man than convince him that he's been fooled, but there should sort of be an addendum, like, but once he realizes you can't fool him again, like that's done. You've only
Totally.
got one shot. Okay,
Yeah.
all right, so tell me about Earthbucks. Let's get onto this. So after all that is said and done, we're here in 2025, and you're working on your new cryptocurrency that you've
Can we
launched here.
let me get into that? Can we take a break? I need to use a restroom, and I'll come back and give you
sure.
the full story of that. Okay, let me just. I'm going to try to pause, and I hope I don't
rush.
accidentally close here.
That's hard. Okay, see you in a sec. Jed, how you doing, man? You're muted.
Said I'm doing pretty good. It's been a long time since I woke up as early as I did today.
Oh, okay. Sorry to put you out so much, but
No, it's all good.
I think that was a classic line, the Calvin Ayre.
Oh my
no
God,
matter how
yeah.
much you dislike Calvin Ayre, he lost more money than anyone. Oofed.
That one
was
got me.
amazing.
I wonder
Oh,
what he's
God.
doing now.
Calvin Ayre, yeah, we haven't heard much from him actually. He's been made his last whatever. I'm going on a 1-year tour post, but I'm still going to be involved in SV guys. Pinky promise.
Yeah.
We'll still be doing loads of stuff. Haven't heard much more. He used to be obsessed with Twitter. He was in there every day, arguing with people. Probably healthy for his own mental state if he's taken some time off.
And then thinking like those emails back and forth where Craig was like, "Oh, I could go to the court if you paid me, what was it like?"
Another 100 mil or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder if he's just like piss off after he lost the Copa one. We're not doing this anymore.
That's it. I'm finally done. What pushes a man past his limits? Oh, it's truly a sight to behold. But yeah, no, I'm glad that we can get so many insights into the history. That whole thing about the Greg Maxwell party, like that's actually kind of crazy. Like the Blockstream, we should have asked him about the lizards. Like, did he see any lizards there? What?
Hold on, is there some lizard lore that I'm unaware of?
Well, just that people have those jokes about like the Blockstream guys are the lizard people that are controlling the bankers controlling the whole Bitcoin.
Right.
And then they themselves bought some like lizard what are they called? Not wigs, but like head costumes, masks. Yeah, basically lizard masks, and they put them all on, and they took photos of them all sitting around. You can look it up, Blockstream lizards on Google. Of them all sitting around laughing in the office, and they did it ironically, like haha, they think we're the lizards. But then, of course, everybody was like, look here, now we have the proof. Even though it was kind of one of those things. It's like a joke is only funny because it has a seed of truth, you know?
Wow. Amazing. Hold on. Let me share this for just a moment.
Yeah. Ryan, do you know about these? Did you see any lizards when you met up with the Blockstream people in 2014?
Interesting question. I can't quite see what it says on the tweet there. It looks really small on my screen.
It's this one. It's this photo that the Blockstream guys, as a troll, they all put on lizard masks and sat in the Blockstream office and took. There's a few photos of them all there, like joking on the
That's
idea
really
of,
weird.
They think we're the yeah, it is. There was like everybody said they were the lizard people controlling Bitcoin, and they were like, haha, we'll prank these guys by doing an ironic photo shoot. But then it just kind of proved the point, because a joke is only funny if it has
exactly
truth, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's to me that comes across as weird. It sounds like, I think there are, again, like I don't want to speak down or talk down. I passionately disagree with Greg Maxwell and all those guys. He quit a long time ago. I don't even know what he's doing these days, but he was one of the founders.
He's still
okay. I'm not surprised. Whoever's running Blockstream now, but their culture, I think they're a bit, inward, socially awkward. Many of us are. I'm an introvert. I can relate to that to some extent, but I just think that's a bad joke. I don't think it's funny. I think it just looks ridiculous. And it's like, yes, exactly. You guys are like lizard people. Don't you get it?
Yeah, it's just a sort of a bit of a cell phone in my point of view. But anyway, that's just what we got onto. Okay, Earthbucks. Tell me about it. 2024, I guess you started 2025, where you've got a fresh slate. What's the game plan with this? And even just walk me through the project. I've got some notes here on the slide, but that was just my view of it from reading some of the blog posts.
Yeah, that's a perfectly good overview right there. So thank you for putting this together, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. I didn't have to speak about it, but I'm glad that you're going to allow me to speak about Earthbucks on the Bitcoin Cash channel here. What it is I never considered making my own blockchain for years and years and years. I was a Bitcoin maximalist. It was when Craig Wright lost in court, and I hate that that's a part of the story, but that's the reality. When he lost in court, I'm like, that's just done. There is no way BSV is happening. I was not that into Bitcoin Cash, but I want to explain why I didn't jump out and immediately start using Bitcoin Cash. The primary reason is actually because Bitcoin Cash carries with it a lot of baggage. That's the word that I would use, going back to 2009. It also has a lot of assets because it has a level of maturity that also goes back to 2009. So it sort of cuts both ways, right? There's goodness to the fact that it goes back to 2009, but there are problems, which as an engineer, I could cover tons of this. It is a very useful system. I believe everything could still work. You're like an optimist when I see you talk about all this stuff. There is absolutely in my opinion, a realistic possibility of Bitcoin Cash as a global world reserve currency. That's still possible. It's more likely that it would be Bitcoin Cash than Bitcoin for reasons I'm happy to go into. That's a whole other story.
They know that stuff. Yeah, we've done that.
Yeah. Okay. So the problem is the baggage. The problem is all these years I had to waste so much time arguing with people over the stupidest stuff I've ever heard. Like the maximum block size is one example. That's the biggest example that I'm just. How can anybody think that it's a good idea to permanently cap the block size? You're obviously going to make it impossible for people to use it. But there are tons of other things that I argued with other people in Bitcoin, in Bitcoin Cash, and Bitcoin SV, that the thing is, when you don't have a clear leader, there are reasons why that's a good thing, which is that, okay, great, it's decentralized. Like, how are you going to take over something that doesn't even have a leader? Great. But there are also downsides to that, which is that, well, clear leadership is also really useful when something actually needs to change. So having a leader say, I'm the leader, this has to change, I'm making a decision, this is what we're changing now, then it happens. So leadership can also be good. I have tons of ideas, so I'm happy to try and cover all of my ideas. Earthbucks is intentionally similar to Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash in some ways, but it diverges in a ton of ways that are not impossible to integrate into Bitcoin Cash, but that would be very difficult to lobby and politic my way into getting these changes into Bitcoin Cash. So let me give you an example. I wrote a blog post about the biggest difference between Earthbucks and Bitcoin is the domain name. This is actually a subtle difference between Earthbucks and Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin. And let's just forget about Bitcoin. Let's talk about Bitcoin Cash. It's a subtle difference between Earthbucks and Bitcoin Cash, but it's actually a very, very, very important difference that could be done in Bitcoin Cash, but it would require rethinking how the network works, how the software works, how the ecosystem works. It would not be easy. It would require getting buy-in from the entire Bitcoin Cash ecosystem to make this change. The change is as follows. Last I checked, I did try to research Bitcoin Cash yesterday. I'm not totally up to speed, so if I say something wrong, please correct me. Last I checked, Bitcoin Cash was still using a custom peer-to-peer protocol on TCP port 8333. I don't know if the port changed.
It might be 8334, but
okay.
Again,
one of those.
I'm reaching here, but yeah, okay. In essence, yes.
Last I checked, when you run the Bitcoin Cash software, what it does is it connects to other peers. It starts with a seed list of peers. You only need one peer because you simply ask that peer for more peers, and now you get more peers. And so you connect to the peer-to-peer network. And you connect to a number of nodes. You might connect to I used to have mine configured to connect up to 100 nodes. And I try to make sure that the most well-connected nodes are in my list of the 100 nodes. I would hard code like 5 IP addresses or something like this. This is how it works. It's as though, and now this is inherited from 2008 when Satoshi was writing Bitcoin, right? It launched in 2009, but obviously it launched in January of 2009. So these decisions were made in 2008 or earlier. At that time, this is how peer-to-peer networks worked. But what happened from then until now is the total dominance of the web. The web is the underlying communication protocol. It's not TCP. Nobody uses TCP for hardly anything unless it's legacy. If you're building something that developers are going to use, it's probably on the web, because the web has actually solved almost every single issue with respect to using the web. You're not going to use TCP. You might use TCP under the web or whatever. But you're going to be using the web. You're going to be using domain names and HTTPS, which were not totally established back then. There were still a lot of HTTP websites. Now everybody uses HTTPS. So the web has changed. The web has matured. The biggest change that I have made is in a block, there's something I call a mint transaction. The mint transaction is the Coinbase transaction. It's called something different, and it's a little bit different, which I could cover, but I call it a mint transaction. The mine, and this is also different, on our Earthbucks, I call them a mine. It's the same thing as a mining pool. So you can think of it as a mining pool from Bitcoin Cash being what I call a mine. A mine has a domain name, and it puts the domain name in the mint transaction. There's a reason why it's in the mint transaction, but it doesn't matter. A mint transaction is in a block. The domain name is in the block. So whenever a mine produces a new block, it puts the domain name in there. That is the only thing you need to do to have a name for the domain name that you can communicate with authentically, meaning I know I'm talking with that mine. This is actually not a feature that Bitcoin Cash has. There's no naming system. There's no way to authentically communicate with an identity. Because the peer-to-peer network is based on IP addresses, those can be man-in-the-middle attacked. You don't know that you're talking with somebody. IP addresses do not have any cryptography. There might be cryptography that you get added to, but one way or another, you have to have a public key. This is provided with HTTPS. If you put the domain name in a block header or the mint transaction, you can now query that domain name and confirm if they give you the block, they're affirming they are that name. And you're relying on actually the public key system of the web, which is HTTPS actually. You can then also use other keys, which I use much of the same cryptography as Bitcoin Cash. So there are other keys involved. But I'm using actually the PKI system of the web, which is HTTPS. You could also argue it's the PKI system of the internet as a whole, because HTTPS is now the ubiquitous protocol that everyone would use for everything unless you have a very good reason to use something else. So I rely on that system. This matters immensely. It makes all the difference in the world for the reasons I'm going to explain. Bitcoin Cash can be Sybil attacked. You don't know if you're talking with the real node. You can go to a mining pool's website. They give you an IP address. that IP address can be man in the middle. You don't know if you're authentically communicating with that mining pool via the IP address. You have to have something like a domain name and HTTPS to authentically communicate with that service. On Bitcoin Cash, I don't know how many nodes there are. I know on Bitcoin it's like 20,000 full nodes or something like this. It's probably less than that on Bitcoin Cash, but probably a lot. There's a larger number of nodes. Most of the businesses are probably running a node because the blocks are small enough now that it's not that big of a deal to run a full node. They can run a full node. It's not like that on Earthbucks. On Earthbucks, the mines only run a full node. And again, I call them a mine. Again, this matters for the following reason. Because you can authentically identify the mines, there's only like 10 of them. There's never going to be 1 million. There's never going to be anywhere near 1 million. If there's only 10, you can track the latest working Merkle tree of every mine. Every mine identifies the other mines, tracks the latest working Merkle tree. What this lets you do is you can send transactions and blocks instantly because there's a second aspect to transaction broadcast. You broadcast the transaction to the mines. They tell you if it's valid. If it's universally valid on every mine, you then also send them your latest working Merkle tree, which is very simple because it's just the order number of that transaction from the perspective of your mine. Every mine tracks the latest working Merkle tree of every other mine. This does two things. Number one, when a new transaction is created, if there's no double spend, you get instant transaction validation across the entire network because you've guaranteed it's in the working Merkle tree of every mine. Therefore, you don't have to wait for a block. Therefore, you have instant transaction propagation. Secondly, you have instant block propagation because when a new block happens, the mint transaction is at the end of the block. The mint transaction is just a new transaction with a header attached. So when you find a new block, what you're finding like a special type of transaction that also has a header, which includes the Merkle root. So you're sending around just the mint transaction and the header. That's almost no data. There's no reason to send the block a second time. Bitcoin Cash has the flaw that you send every transaction twice. It's more complicated than that because of the way that the transactions are reordered. In my humble opinion, that was a mistake in Bitcoin Cash. You should not be randomizing the block at the end. You should keep
right? Because we've got CTOR, which is ironically what you mentioned before. The BCH transactions are always in the same order, deterministically per block. So again, you just need the header, and then as long as you have the list of transactions, you're good to go.
That probably works in most cases, yes. And in worst case scenario, you might have to send the entire block. It does. The difference is simply that you don't actually know because you don't know who the mines are. So you don't know who has what and who's missing what. So you might still have to send missing transactions. And that's not what happens on Earthbucks. Okay. So it is true. No, you're right. That CTOR is still an advance over what happened before. I agree with that. I'm just saying the whole idea of all that isn't actually necessary is what I'm saying. You don't even have to do any of that. If you simply put the transactions in order, and you do this Merkle tree stuff that I'm talking about with identifying the mines, there is never a case when you need to send the entire block again. It never happens. So anyway, but yeah, no, I agree that CTOR is still an improvement over what happened before. But this is one of those things where, okay, that's also fine. There's nothing wrong with what Bitcoin Cash does, but I have a different idea. And I think mine is better because it allows, for the reasons I said, total finality of a transaction right away. And then secondly, there's no reason to ever send around the entire block a second time. So I would argue, right now it's purely theoretical because my system's not being finished, but I would argue on theoretical grounds, hopefully soon to be practical grounds, that mine is better. But is it better enough that people in Bitcoin Cash would want to change everything to do it my way? Maybe if I prove mine first and get it out there, right? They'd be like, oh, that's actually now been proven. I mean, maybe we should do it like that. And Bitcoin Cash could change and do it like that. So that's the biggest change. There are many, many, many other things though. And I'll just get before I could go on. And again, something else I could talk about for 6 hours, but just to give you a flavor for the other changes. There's no C++. This is a from scratch blockchain written in TypeScript and Rust, two languages that didn't exist in 2008. TypeScript and Rust are a very good modern tech stack. It runs in a container in the cloud. It's not just normal users are never going to run a full node. There's never a phase in Earthbucks when a user goes to earthbucks.org and downloads the .exe file, earthbucks.exe. Never going to happen. It doesn't work like that at all. If you're running a mine, it's in the cloud already. Users simply log into a website. If you're a business, you probably run a wallet and you probably connect to the other mines. So the software stack is much more modern, and it's based on 100% modern technologies. I also changed some crypto. It uses Blake 3, which is a modern hash function. So there's a ton of other stuff that's different that is just modern. I've dropped all legacy. So the fundamental ideas are by starting a new one, I don't have to worry about old UTXOs. I can start the mining incentive over. New users join. You can mine Earthbucks right now and actually get a significant amount of Earthbucks as a new user with a consumer GPU, which is not realistic with Bitcoin Cash. So I start all that over. I have no social baggage. I have no branding baggage. I have no technical baggage. But the cost, of course, but I'm also starting completely over. There's no ecosystem. There's no exchanges. There's no wallets. There's no apps. Nothing. So it's completely starting over. But that's the idea, is that by starting over, modern tech stack, getting rid of all baggage, I get a clean start with something new. And there are true improvements that, in my humble opinion, are better. But the only way to really know that is to see it proven in years to come, because it will take years to truly prove these ideas. Along the way, just in conclusion, I plan to work with Bitcoin Cash. The best way for me to bootstrap Earthbucks is actually to treat Bitcoin Cash as the number 2 for me. You said earlier something like your Bitcoin Cash was number 1 and you had some other number 2 or something. Well, Bitcoin Cash for me is number 2 because it's easier for me to plug into Bitcoin Cash than it is to plug into fiat currency. With Bitcoin Cash, I plan to make my own exchange trading Earthbucks for Bitcoin Cash, which is way easier technically and legally than making a fiat currency exchange. So there will be a cryptocurrency exchange. And so I plan to work with Bitcoin Cash, and I'm hoping that no one hates me for making a competing cryptocurrency. It's competing over the long run, but it will be quite, at least years before it's a serious competitor for Bitcoin Cash. It is, but my vision is similar to, but also not the same as Bitcoin Cash. And I would say, again, in conclusion, the Bitcoin Cash people should hopefully see Earthbucks in a positive light as a way to run all these experiments on new ideas that, if they are successful, could be brought into Bitcoin Cash. And then for the foreseeable future, they'll just coexist as competing cryptocurrencies. Yeah,
I think this is an interesting topic. Again, we're not going to have 6 hours to do it all now, but maybe at another time we can. You've got a lot of other different ideas. I think you're underselling. Even just when I was having a bit of a poke around, you had sort of UTXO cycling for ways to recover like lost coins, and you had this concept that people couldn't sell it below $1, which you admit in the blog post that you couldn't enforce, but it's like an interesting concept to see how far you could get with trying to enforce that, from the very beginning of a cryptocurrency network. And like this idea of the domain names, I've got to admit that I'm skeptical just when you hear anything for the first time. You got to sit with it for a little while, so then it sort of brings up the question of, well, what if enough of those mines get captured? How do you switch to other domain names? Even registering a domain name, there's some centralized party there, etc. There's a lot to work out. But it's clearly not something that you've embarked on just, like everyone and their dog starts a crypto because they don't really know what's involved, but you actually do, right? I don't know if you want to add it. How long have you been thinking about this? Well,
yeah, what this is this is me doing everything in my power to build on Bitcoin for many years and failing. Right? Even if you're still optimistic about Bitcoin Cash, but I certainly haven't succeeded. None of my products achieved mainstream adoption. So it's me reflecting on all that years and years and years of working on all this stuff. Now, I never planned to make my own blockchain, but it's like now I see that as my best opportunity. I'm going to do all of these things right, which means I think Satoshi did some things right. I think he made one fatal mistake with the maximum block size. And I think he made a bunch of other decisions that were fine for 2008, but they're simply not optimal in 2024, now 2025. I'm going to fix all that stuff. Number 1, no maximum block size. Number 2, fix every other issue that I've learned after working on Bitcoin for me since 2011. So, it's now 14 years. of, let's just say, involvement in Bitcoin. Every single little issue. Let me just briefly, because you brought up UTXO cycling, and my little community has been controversial, but I think this is very important. People have always criticized Bitcoin. Oh, you have to hold these UTXOs forever. Like if you hold a UTXO from 2009, and there are still some out there, they still exist. They still take up storage space. You have no idea if that person even exists. So the UTXO set pretty much just grows without bound, irrespective of the current level of usage. You have to hold on to all those UTXOs, even if your current users might even be smaller. My solution to this is to expire all UTXOs. There's two stages. There's what I call a recovery stage and an expiry phase. They ultimately expire. You should cycle your own UTXOs by simply logging in and pressing a button. If you don't do that, someone else is going to do it for you. Your UTXOs are going to cycle and merge. So, and there's a lot of details about how this works exactly. But in doing this, the current UTXO set is the active users only. You don't, so it's sort of pruned already. Like there's a, this whole, people have talked about pruning in Bitcoin stuff. This is already pruned. You get rid of all old stuff. Technically, you can never delete the blockchain, but you actually technically can, because nobody has to retain access to that old data. And so if all UTXOs are knowingly spent, nobody has to have the old UTXOs. They've all been spent. So anyway, it's another example of something that you actually can't do that one on Bitcoin Cash without violating the social contract that there already are old UTXOs. You can't just decide you're going to cycle them now. The only way to do that is if that's built in on day one. And so that's why I made the controversial decision, and not all users agreed with me. Like, no, we have to do it this way. We have to cycle all the UTXOs because that's going to make sure the UTXO set stays the same size as the number of users, and that makes the system more scalable. If that's a mistake, it's okay. I can reverse the mistake. What I could never do is add that in later without violating the social contract. So that's another example of tons of stuff that, like, to say that would be controversial on Bitcoin Cash would be putting it mildly. You probably just could never do it on Bitcoin Cash, but I can do it on a new one.
Yes. Well, I think this is a fascinating, experiment. I'm going to be, keeping an eye on this for sure, because I like that you're trying some different stuff, maybe some of it sticks, maybe some of it's great, and maybe some of it isn't, maybe some of it we can borrow, maybe none of it, I don't know. But it seems like, it's different. It's similar enough to be worth looking at, and it's different enough that something really cool might come out of it, actually. So I'm kind of, impressed in hearing you talk about. How's it been going so far? How long have you been launched, and what's the sort of traction to date?
Great question. Yeah. So first of all, thank you again for taking it seriously and allowing me to talk about that. And I appreciate your input and your point of view on it. So I started working on it in March of last year. So I think it's been a little more than 9 months now. It officially launched the Genesis block in November. It's mined by consumers. So anybody can go to earthbucks.com, sign up for free, and start mining with your consumer GPU. You swipe a button. For people that know me, you know the money button with the swipe. It uses a swipe. You got to swipe to mine. You can also mine automatically. There's a lot of stuff that I'm working on. The community has grown. So like we have, last I counted, it was more than 600 people had mined at least some Earthbucks. That's pretty good. I think I'm outdoing Bitcoin by the comparison. If you go all the way back to 2009, it was probably like Satoshi and Hal Finney and like that guy, I can't remember his name right now, but there's like 3 people mining Bitcoin in the early. There's more than that. Of course, that's because Bitcoin already exists. The cryptocurrency industry is already happening. But the point is, it has grown. It's growing. It's growing today because every single day now I have to worry about the server usage because it's a long story, but the way it works require that I have a pretty good database server and a pretty good GPU myself in the cloud. I have to verify proof of work. I didn't make everything as efficient as possible, so I have to daily worry about server usage as it's growing, as more people figure out how to mine automatically. So we had a record high. We had more than 100 people mining in the past 24 hours, or I should say more than 100 users. I don't know how many of those people are actually real people, but more than 100 people. I will also say, don't be jealous. We briefly had more transactions in a block than Bitcoin Cash because somebody started spamming it. Nice. So we had for like a couple hours, 2 days ago or something like that, we were briefly bigger than Bitcoin Cash by transaction volume because somebody was spamming it. I had to ban the user. It's a long story. They were intentionally spamming it and breaking it. But anyway,
Well,
that just gives you a scale.
Until someone tries to break it, that's a sign of success right there. If I've heard of one,
Yeah, so there are lots of signs like that. So it's growing. If you look at the chart of the average difficulty of blocks, it's growing very, very rapidly. So people will probably find it because of this podcast. So we'll probably get more users, and it's growing fast enough. Like it's getting expensive. So I'm dedicating my time. It's not that big yet. Again, it's we're 100 users in one day. That's good. That's not profitable for me yet. I'm approximately even. We'll see how much money I earn in the month of January and all this stuff. But I'm in the month of December, I more than broke even because I earn money from an identity verification service and I earn money from mining, and I actually more than broke even. If I can pull that off in the month of January, then we're good. Like we're on a good track, right? So it could be happening. Give me another 3 months and I'll be able to tell you whether I actually kept being profitable or what. So it is growing. I'm very optimistic. And like I said, what I'm going to be doing is I'll announce more about how I'm working with Bitcoin Cash because I'm going to make an exchange. I want to make sure there's an exchange value. And this is a part of my MVP is not just launching. I'm going to launch multiple mines, but also an exchange because I don't want to be dependent on the existing cryptocurrency exchanges. And it makes a hell of a lot of sense if I make it so that Earthbucks is tradable to Bitcoin Cash first, both because it'll technically work. I know the ecosystem is big enough. And of course, people like you already know who I am. So I've already been welcomed, even just mentioning Bitcoin Cash, you're like, hey, Ryan, you come back. So I'm already welcomed in, which makes it very easy. So my plan is to basically build an exchange with Earthbucks, Bitcoin Cash, and then I will share my ideas with you guys. And my ideas will be out there and people will have the ability to integrate or not integrate in whatever way you want to. My ideas can be anywhere from changes to the Bitcoin Cash protocol, changes that don't require changing the protocol, but other user layer stuff, which I'll explain later, which is a whole lot. But everything about making both blockchains more successful because we'll both benefit if they, you won't benefit yet because Earthbucks is too small, but maybe one day Bitcoin Cash will actually benefit from the growth of Earthbucks and maybe it'll go both ways. Certainly near term, I benefit from having a cryptocurrency that I can exchange with that just works, allows Earthbucks to get off the ground very quickly, more quickly than Bitcoin was originally.
Yeah, wow, okay. This is a fascinating thing. Jet, you look like you have a question there.
Yeah. So I'm trying to understand the mine's domain system because what about the DNS resolver? Couldn't someone still spoof the mine at the end of the day?
Not really. Not when you're using HTTPS. So we don't really use DNS. We use the web. And the difference is when you communicate with a domain name over HTTPS, that is an authentic communication. So there's no spoofing that. There's no man in the middle attack for that. If your DNS resolver gives you the wrong IP address, the wrong IP address doesn't have the private key that's used for HTTPS. So there's no way to man in the middle HTTPS. So it's not just a domain name, it's HTTPS.
So the public or like the key pair there essentially acts as the SSL certificate.
There is an SSL certificate. There's no other key pair. SSL is the
right.
key.
Right. Okay. All right. I'll have to do some more reading.
Needs more thought. There you go. You passed the first test, the snap quiz on the BCH podcast. Not bad. Not bad. And we just had somebody in the chat, Ender's Game JP says, I just signed up. It says mining pause to investigate an error.
Okay.
So,
it crashed. Okay. I don't know what that is. Something happened while I don't know. I'll have to investigate with that. It's a long story. The software is immature, so it must have crashed while we're on here, and it's crashed several times recently. I'm fixing the bug, so if it crashed, I'm sorry. Please wait until later. I can't look at it on the podcast. I'll look at it.
Try it again in 24 hours. Okay. All right. Cool. Well, I guess we'll see how that plays out. But an interesting project to keep an eye on. BCH is in sort of a unique position where it is this sort of center of Bitcoin innovation, because BTC sort of split off from it, and then BSV, and then XEC. There's also the guys doing Nexa from BCH Unlimited, who did the similar thing to you, where they kind of, I guess they didn't rewrite everything in TypeScript necessarily, but they kind of were like, okay, BCH is basically solid, but let's start again from scratch with a few different tweaks of our own, So it's actually a fascinating little historical dynamic we've got going there, that people keep coming back to. Like, Satoshi got it mostly right, but I've got my own flavor. Quite an interesting pattern to see. Anyway, that brings us to BCH in 2025. You said yesterday that you are obviously reading up on it. I gave you a bunch of links. Some other people do, and I guess you've been sort of at the edges of your awareness, paying attention for many years anyway. What's your thinking on BCH in 2025? From your point of view, how are we doing?
Well, I would sort of echo your optimistic point there about, it sort of survived a hell of a lot of challenges to get to this point. And Bitcoin Cash is still kicking. So I went through my own challenges, and I come back and I look at the ecosystem and I'm like, well, I tried to look at Bitcoin with fresh eyes. I'm like, should I go be a part of these small block people? I'm like, I just literally can't use it. I still just don't understand what these people are saying. Like, I'm telling you, Lightning Network doesn't work. They still believe that I'm supposed to somehow use Lightning Network, and it doesn't work. I just don't think this is going to work. I honestly tried to look at Bitcoin with fresh eyes in that respect. Meanwhile, Bitcoin Cash is currently working. The blocks are sufficiently large to allow transaction volume to occur. It's happening. Fees are low. There's obviously an ecosystem building on this. There are, multiple different individuals and businesses involved in all this stuff. It seems to have a diverse, thriving ecosystem. It's going. And it doesn't have a fatal flaw the way that Bitcoin does. That's great. It seems to have survived all this stuff. It's survived Psycho Craig Wright, and it survived all this other stuff. There's all this drama that happened, and it's still going. So and the fundamentals are still there. So, I'd say I'm very optimistic. As I said, I plan to be involved. I'm going to use Bitcoin Cash as my number 2. There might be a number 3, but I'm not in any hurry to add a number 3. So when I create the exchange, it'll be Earthbucks to Bitcoin Cash. I think that's probably good enough for a while. There's no reason for me to add a number 3. I need to create a exchange value for Earthbucks so that it can be used. The next thing I would be looking at is all of these other, there's so much that we could cover, but there's, in my opinion, I've always been dedicated to cash for end users. We need to solve all the issues, stuff that mostly has nothing to do with the underlying protocol. All of the issues that affect people actually using it as an electronic cash system. There's a long list of issues. When I accepted Bitcoin Cash recently, I received a transaction. I had to use a Bitcoin Cash address. In my humble opinion, we can do better than this. I don't think we should be using random looking addresses. I think we should use email addresses, as I've pushed. I forget if I pushed this idea originally on Bitcoin Cash, but certainly in the BSV world, I pushed this idea. This is how Earthbucks works today. You get an email address. The reason for this is it's bridges every sort of user friendliness and technical constraint of having an address that users can understand, while also being essentially maximally decentralized. The difference is it's not a key, it's an address. There's a server involved. There's minimal trust. You have to query the server to actually get a new key. You can run your own server. I'm sure some enthusiasts will run their own server. Most users won't. Most users are going to use a business, and they'll let the business host their keys. It doesn't mean the business can see your keys. They can still be self-custodial, but it does mean you trust the business to give an accurate public key to somebody that queries it. In my opinion, that configuration allows us to solve tons of user experience issues. I could go on and on and on about all the things, the problems that this solves. It's better user experience. It's better technically. And so what I'm going to do is start putting some of my ideas out there. I have a blog at ryanxcharles.com. I think as soon as this is, maybe not today, but soon, I'm going to write up a brief summary of my ideas for Bitcoin Cash. And again, I want to, before I start pushing people around and saying it should be like this, Bitcoin Cash obviously deserves a lot of credit for getting to this point. It's doing something right. I'm not trying to push my ideas, but I do have ideas about how I think things could be. and we'll just see whether my ideas are embraced. My ideas don't have to be embraced at all for Bitcoin Cash to continue to be useful, and I'll continue to be using it. But I will be putting that out there, and if there's room to collaborate, let's say with Bitcoin Cash people on some of these ideas, most of which have nothing to do with the underlying protocol. Some of them do, some of them don't. Maybe some of them could be adopted or not or whatever. But like just to give an example, like I threw out the idea of atomic swaps between Bitcoin Cash and Earthbucks. That's the sort of thing that I can implement. That's a good idea for me to get my exchange going. Atomic swaps, self-custodial keys, less regulatory burden for me to worry about, and more and just cool and interesting, and it would work and it would get it. So these are the sort of ideas that I plan to explore to both to use Bitcoin Cash and to link it into Earthbucks and all this stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm personally looking forward to seeing this list. I'll read it for sure. But yeah, I mean, I think, and that's also something that maybe you'll reacclimatize to, is the current, attitude of BCHs to different ideas. I think we're getting better about, because one of the big traumas of all these different things is that people then get resistant to any change, right? They say, no, we can't have that change because it's an attacker, or it's, whatever, like everything gets fudded, like basically right now, BCH, I think, is doing a pretty good job of having a core mission that everybody knows that we're on, but also being kind of a little open-minded if we got to be a little flexible at the edges. I think anything that was a huge change, you might get some pushback on, but it just is a thought experiment. There's no harm that can be kind of done there. So I'm interested to see what kind of stuff you have. Do you have any thoughts on, cash tokens, ABLA, VM limits, this stuff that's been cooking while you've been out of the picture? What do you make of that?
Yeah, I only briefly looked at a lot of that stuff, so I can't give you some in-depth analysis. I did read a little bit about the cash tokens and stuff. What I take all that as a sign is that the ecosystem is moving forward. So I can't tell you whether did they do it right or something. Right? I mean, I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know. I don't understand cash tokens. I didn't take enough time to really understand what it is. The ideas are perfectly valid and good, though. And I saw a lot of people thinking and pushing forward. I think you have to be willing to change. We can all respect Satoshi Nakamoto and say, look, okay, we all like Satoshi. We all like the original idea, but Satoshi's gone. And we're in the situation we're in today. Here are the things that we want. Here are the things that we need. Here's the current status. Being willing to change and upgrade is important. And I think it shows that Bitcoin Cash is doing that there is an ecosystem. There are people doing these things, making important changes that move things forward. So I see all that as a positive sign. But as far as the details, I can't say, but I think what it does is it's a good sign for the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem that it's working.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So maybe I'll be interested again if once you've had a bit more of an in-depth look at it, what you turn up. That will also be super fascinating to hear. What about abandoning EBX? In what? Again, this is just a hypothetical, but what would it take for you? Let's say would be some point of user growth of BCH that you were like, wait, these guys are actually doing. They're going to be the global reserve currency. I got to be on this train, like no matter what.
Sure.
What would it take?
There are lots of things. I mean, I think of myself as a pragmatist. I mean, I think if it were obvious that were happening, that Bitcoin Cash were becoming the world reserve currency, be like, there's no reason to build my little experiment anymore, right? So obviously, the top thing, if it actually happened, would be essentially a flippening between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin. If that actually happened, I'd be like, well, that was what I've been waiting for. Yeah, exactly.
2 to 1, 3 to 1. What number do we have to get to against BTC? At 2 to 1, if we ran it back up to 50% of the market cap. No. 1 to 1.
Oh, versus, well, first of all, if it were 1 to 1, that would obviously be the flippening.
That's the flippening,
right?
Yeah.
If you achieve the actual flippening, that's it.
Yeah.
And I think that would be the death of Bitcoin Core, because I think people would exit Bitcoin Core and it literally can't survive. It would actually die
on the way out. Yeah, exactly.
It'll literally just the blockchain will halt because all the mining would move to Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah.
They're done. They're all rugged. Exactly. That would actually happen. People have talked about that for years, and they get dismissed by the Bitcoin Core people. But the Bitcoin Core people have this attitude of, but the price just goes up forever. It just literally always goes up. But that's what people always say in every bubble. And no, it actually doesn't literally just always go up forever. It will fall. And that is a fatal, fatal problem for a Bitcoin Core. So anyway, if that happened, I would switch to Bitcoin Cash. It could happen. All the fundamentals are still there in Bitcoin Cash for that to be possible. But I would just also say your optimistic view, my counterpoint, devil's advocate, by price, it's a lot smaller.
Yes.
So, and by attention, it's a lot smaller. So yes, that's still possible, but it's still a lot smaller by a lot of metrics.
This is why I've been, I don't know how much of the show you've watched, but I do this with a lot of guests. I try and get them. I mean, it's just for fun. Nobody's holding your feet to the fire, but just like at 2-1, could you see it would probably already be over at 2-1, right? If BCH ran it back from 200
You mean
to 1
BTC is 2 to BCH 1?
No. If the ratio goes 1 to 2 the other way, then
which
BTC
one is 1 and which one is 2?
I'm saying if BCH was half of BTC, it's probably over, right? If we go back from where we are now to its half.
Okay, so the question is, obviously if it's 1-1, it's over.
Yeah.
But at what point? I think if it were rising that spectacular, I would say it depends on the other news that's going on. Why is that happening? Because what happened in late 2017, it got up to, I don't know what the fraction was, but I think it was briefly number 2 on the current, it was number 2 after Bitcoin. It was pretty close. It could have happened. It didn't happen. But at the time, the reason was there was hard to know what's going on inside people's minds when they pumped the price that high. But it seemed possible to me that there was going to be a flippening, that it was actually going to, it didn't happen. But if it also seems realistic that that's going to happen, I would say that is obviously also, but why? Is it because Bitcoin Cash is rising, or is Bitcoin Core falling through the floor?
Well,
there's all sorts of reasons.
There's a tipping point. That's the thing. I'm always interested in asking people, and the reason is because it's a social coordination game. Like if you thought at 2-1 it's over, then someone else would think, well, at 1-1 it would be over. At 2-1 I'm not sure, but if it was 2-1 and Ryan was on board, that's pretty good odds. And then you have somebody else who goes, oh, but I could see if both of those guys would be in at 2-1, I would be actually be in at 3-1 and front run them, so you get this kind of effect, right? And because if a flippening genuinely starts, obviously all the people in the Bitcoin industry will be the first ones to know, but not the ones who have put themselves in an echo chamber. But anybody who's got half a brain will see that BCH is spiking and not stopping. It goes from 20th to 10th to 6th on the coin market cap, and at that point it's just going to all FOMO. Everybody's going to FOMO in, and it'll go the rest of the way, right? So I just am interested.
Well, I'll put it this way. I agree with you that it would be before 1-1. There's definitely a point, because if it were rising that spectacularly, there's going to be a news cycle going on. It's going to be clear that that's happening. If that were happening, it also depends on the status of Earthbucks at that point, because if Earthbucks grows, then I get more and more attached to Earthbucks. But again, I'm not giving up on Bitcoin Cash. I'm using it. So I don't have to quit Earthbucks for Bitcoin Cash to still be bigger or number 1. If it just completely blew Earthbucks out of the water, then at some point it's like, what, this business doesn't matter anymore. We're just Bitcoin Cash now. So I can't give you an actual, it's too difficult to give you an actual number, but I agree that it would be before 1-1. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. This is just a fun game that I like to play with all the guests who are potential BCH returnees, and what they're thinking.
But let me also say, it could be way before 1-1.
Yes.
If Bitcoin Cash is being used. Forget about price completely. Look at all the other metrics. So what if Bitcoin Cash, I looked at the blocks, it was in the hundreds of transactions per block right now. Well, what if Bitcoin Cash had 100,000 transactions per block? Why would that be happening? If that's happening because people are using it as an electronic cash system, even if it has, say, 1/100th the price of BTC, you'd be looking at these other metrics going, wait a second. So yeah, it's got 1/100th the price, but it's got way more transaction volume, whatever it would be. How much would I don't want to do the math in my head, but suppose it were way more than BTC, and it was actually real. It's not somebody running a scam. It was real. Transaction volume was actually that high. That would be a very compelling reason to switch. And in my mind, as EBX founder, would simply be just looking at the numbers going, does EBX have a chance? Have I been outdone?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's all those other metrics, and they're all interlinked, of course, because is it a certain number of transactions? It's at the end of the day, it's a certain number of real people paying attention is
Absolutely.
Basically what it actually is, So, I mean, I've been thinking about this too in my head, because I was thinking, maybe I'll make a Twitter poll, how high will my Twitter following account get? Because that can break it right there. If I had 5 million Twitter followers, it would be over. Like, the flippening would be on just the fact that I'd somehow got my account to 5 million people. So it's like a question of, I'm nearly at 10K. And it's
Elon Musk tweets it.
Yeah,
Elon Musk
exactly.
says, yeah, he's like,
you're on board? Yeah, let's go, baby. Like, I got to ping Elon. Elon, retweet me so that Ryan X. Charles comes back to Bitcoin.
Exactly.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Enough about that. Are you coming to Bliss? We talked about this briefly before, when you said basically it would depend on how things go. Is that with EBX? If EBX is kicking off, you'll have the spare funds to...
Yeah, totally. I would love to. It's possible. I'm definitely considering it. I will take a look after this, look at the conference, look at how run the numbers on how much it would cost me to run it. My server costs are currently exploding. I don't know why Earthbucks crashed while this is going on. My server costs are rapidly rising. It's more than $1,000 per month. Not that high, but the thing is, it's rising, and we don't have that many users. So like, it'll literally explode with usage if I don't get on top of all this. I have to rewrite software. I have to make sure I've got revenue coming in from my 2 different services and all this. I'm just busy with stuff. I will take a look at it though. And I love the idea. I feel very welcomed by you and by other people in the Bitcoin Cash world. I would love to go visit you guys and be a part of that conference. I will take a look at it and seriously consider it. And as I said before we started, if not this year, then the next year, but I'll take a look, and I'll let you guys know. Give me 1 month to get my, get things going. Yeah, get my affairs in order to think about it. If I can still sign up in 1 month and it's not closed or something, and it's still possible.
No.
Yeah.
Ticket sale starts in a couple of weeks, and unless we sell out by then, but I think that's unlikely. We do have plans to already up the ticket, count extra. We've got extra capacity basically, so I think you'll be fine. Cool. All right. Let's just get on to very briefly then. We're running out of time, so we've got to cut out some of the less important stuff at the end. But very, very quickly, I've got a slide here about rehabilitating Bitcoiners, and I wanted to get some thoughts from you on this. Firstly, you're obviously a bit more in touch with the BSV crowd and have been doing your own advocacy to try and unplug them somehow and get them back to reality. But then we also have the BTC guys. Bitcoin Mechanic made a video this week about how he's going to be on a new crusade to reintroduce medium of exchange. Basically what you were saying, that actually it's not working, and they're finally starting to admit that. But he's basically like, well, store of value is great, but we do need at least a bit of medium of exchange, and we've kind of, not getting that going. So we need to get that more back in the discussion. So I wish him the best of luck with that. I mean, I think that's just going to really give him personal experience of that it's all hijacked, which he's been able to avoid confronting until this point. Nothing like trying to use Bitcoin as medium of exchange that'll teach you that it was hijacked. And Eric Wall has also been trying to convince Lynn Alden that Michael Saylor has grown a bit too influential and is busy driving the narrative off a cliff. A bit too late on that one, probably as well too. But all this is to say, how do we get through to everyone who maybe just could give BCH a second look? Do you have any top tips on unplugging people from propaganda?
God, I mean, honestly, the things that we can do, it's truly very difficult, because I could speak to this on multiple different. Take Dan Held as an example, who you brought up earlier. I knew Dan Held from San Francisco like 10 years ago. And honestly, these people, when you benefit from the price rise and you feel like the price rise completely justifies your entire worldview and your entire belief system, I don't think you can pull people like that out. I mean, they're not going to be pulled out unless the price crashes. So especially if they've already got gains and that sort of thing. It takes, maybe some of them can, but it takes a unique person. I mean, maybe 1 in 10 people can truly pull out of something like that. Because otherwise, the only way is the price crashes. If the price crashes, it fails. And even if that happens, people like Dan Held, 10 years later, he's like, no, man, small blocks of the way. I know Bitcoin crashed 10 years ago, but all it takes is one new miner to come in and mine in the chain again, and it'll somehow work. And so some of them are just too far gone. It's the same phenomena with Craig Wright. I know people will think that I can't speak onto this, but honestly, I think I can. BTC is like a leaderless cult. You have a lot of people that have the same type of sort of niche belief system. They don't have a leader because it's hard to pinpoint who that leader would be. You could throw out some names, but I wouldn't say there's any one clear leader. But in other ways, it's a lot like a cult. So I would say I'm not too worried about pulling those people out. I would say my point of view, I've always been a product person. I can't say this has worked because it simply hasn't worked in the past. But I remain convinced that what we really need to do is make products that people actually use. So for Bitcoin Cash, what I'm going to do is start by building this exchange. I've thought about building a Bitcoin Cash specific wallet, which I may end up doing. That's an idea I've had. I have all these ideas for how the technology and the product should work integrated into the web. I want to make it really easy to use and friendly to use and escape the whole argument. So that's my strategy. Again, my strategy has not worked up to this point. Maybe I'm an idiot for doubling down on this strategy. But I do remain convinced that building better products is very important. If people are going to use it as electronic cash, no one's going to run the full node software. You're going to be using end user facing products. We got to make sure that I haven't tried all the latest wallets and things like this. I will try that with time. Maybe that already exists. But we probably need more anyway. We need different types of products. So I would say that part, honestly, I'm personally turned off by trying to convince anyone of anything. So I personally am unlikely. I might write some articles about it and make fun of Bitcoin Core because I don't think it makes any sense. And honestly, my strategy is really to just wait for it to fail and to be on the right side of history. Whether Bitcoin Cash benefits from the failure of Bitcoin Core is really, it's sort of on the Bitcoin Cash world to build that. It's already fundamentally there. So if the Bitcoin Cash world keeps building, keeps growing, be there for Bitcoin to fail. Be there for the last pattern to repeat. For the last group of people that put their money in, they buy into one idea, they finally do their research, maybe the price crashes or something happens. They finally dig in and go, something's off with all this. And Bitcoin Cash is there waiting this whole time. So I would say more like that. Build the products. I'm going to put out my little narrative, my blog posts, my articles, and be there waiting for when it crashes. Because I honestly, in 2024, I seriously tried to give Bitcoin Core another go. I really took a look at it. I look what people are saying. I just don't think that it makes any sense. What they're saying does not make sense. They're not going to be on the right side of history. So the question is, in my mind, if they don't change something, it will fail. There's just no way it could possibly survive. They're going to run out of new money to stop inflating the bubble, and it will crash. And so your goal is to be there as the alternative that can soak up all that volume. Be able to scale when Bitcoin Core can't. Be able to take when people transfer on an exchange into Bitcoin Cash to use Bitcoin Cash to send to another exchange. Be that option that they can use that actually works, that doesn't fail when that happens, and have good products, have a good story in place. And honestly, I think you guys are probably one of the only ones that could actually seriously do that. You have the morality more on your side than any of the alternatives. I think Solana is doing a good job of building their ecosystem. It's completely different technology. They've done a lot of things right, but they don't have the full depth of the moral sort of rightness on their side the way that Bitcoin Cash does. I think they've made a lot of mistakes. Maybe it'll still work out for the Solana people ultimately. But I would just say keep building and don't necessarily expect a flippening until Bitcoin fails. And that's my honest opinion. I could be wrong. I've been wrong about very big things in the past. I've been completely wrong about stuff. And as anybody who knows me knows, I just think ultimately Bitcoin Core will fail. And so if you want the flippening, you need to be there when it fails and don't fail.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, building the product is really key, but it's just like again, it's a virtuous cycle thing. You got to attack kind of both sides at once. You build better products, you build more of an ecosystem that gets more attention. Then you flip a couple people who are kind of like, maybe this is kind of interesting. Then they come in and either bring their existing businesses or they, spin up some new stuff, and then around it goes, right? But that's why I'm always trying to look at how we can attack both sides of the problem. Okay, so just briefly on that meme of the week, this one's a bit of a self-indulgent dunk from me. I'm not going to read it all, but basically last year in January, Shinobi said on Twitter, he was arguing with Bitcoin Mechanic, of all people, and he said Satoshi was actually a big blocker. Its intended purpose was big blocks. And I jumped in there and said, we are so back. And then Shinobi replied to me and said, you are not so back. Good luck, though. January 22nd, 2024. And in the 2025 intro in August, we have Shinobi saying that there's actually a lot of pretty smart B caches out there. So 6 or 7 months from You Are So Not Back to there's a lot of pretty smart B caches, which was just amusing for me. I mean, to his credit, everybody should go and listen to the full clip. We reviewed it on the show, and he said, like, people, you know, who are stuck in the past and not forward looking and blah, blah, blah. You know, he wasn't saying, I've been a bit cheeky with the editing there. But the point was he had to admit at least a few Bitcoin caches have some of the right ideas. So this is just yet another warning of it's a bad idea to argue with me on Twitter, or you might end up in the podcast intro for a whole year. But I don't know how you feel about this, Ryan. Is there any element of, do you know Shinobi? Is he a big
No, I don't know Shinobi.
chatterer?
So
Okay.
I don't know.
He's a
No,
laser type guy.
okay.
He loves
Well,
being
but, yeah, so-
condescending, so it's just very ironic that I'm going to rub it in on him.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think some of these people will come around just because they eventually dig so far, and it's like this just isn't working. So some people are. I mean, I was actually on their side, not as a small blocker ever, but in the sense of being a sort of emotionally driven believer in this vision of Bitcoin. My vision was not the same as theirs. I never liked small blocks. But before drama happened, we were kind of all on the same page. So I can kind of understand that mentality. And, I don't know. I would just say, again, my strategy is build products, and the arguments on the internet. The only value of arguments on the internet are to be on the right side of history when it happens. People, what they do is when they change their mind, you had nothing to do with it, at least in their own mind. You had nothing to do with it. They'll change their mind. They're like, oh, that guy was right all along. Look at this. And then they go back and they'll find your article. What'll happen is after they change their mind, they'll be like, look at Hijacking Bitcoin. This book was it.
Yes,
so
exactly.
it'll become the book that everybody cites after they all change their mind.
Yes, exactly. They didn't see it beforehand, but I love that, the way humans have this capacity to just rationalize, like, the facts changed, and I changed my mind exactly when the facts changed. I immediately noticed. I immediately changed my mind because I'm a rational human being, and it's not that anybody knew before. Nobody could have known. The circumstances were different. As soon as it became justified to hold my position, I immediately switched and had it, and be damned to anyone who had my position before on the same or different facts.
But on this point, you're making me think of a lesson that I hope that I learned from all this, because I've been mean to people, but it's a reason to not be mean. It's because the thing is, they might change their mind and they might come back, and you might regret having been mean to that person. So it's probably better to not be mean. If there's any lesson, it's that. It's like, just don't be mean to the believers.
Well, I don't know that I'm upholding that principle so much, but what I will say, and everybody who listens to the show knows this, is that especially on Twitter and stuff like that, I can be antagonistic, like in these kind of places, but I'm trying to have fun with them, and I am trying to break down some of their cognitive dissonance. Sometimes you just need to jab someone a bit to push them over the edge. Like, it's been, a rough road getting people to actually take a look at BCH and et cetera. And one of the funniest things, I think, is that I never experience it really, but that all these people who argue with me on Twitter and they think this retard or something, and then they go and listen to the show, and I'm like this guy who laughs and has a good time and is like joking with everyone and stuff. And then it's like, my hope is that moment of contrast really helps them to think, wait, what's going on here? Like, I need to actually look into this. Anyway, that's just my strategy. Okay, let's talk briefly about crypto. I think we can fit it in. We're not on too strict of a time limit. You were mentioning before about Solana and Ethereum. I've been following that story as well too. It's really interesting to see the ETH people start to panic a bit as Sol creeps up on them, because I feel like, firstly, it's a prelude of what's going to happen when BCH flips BTC, but it's also just such a dynamic of this new kind of crypto economic warfare, that we're in. Like before the block size wars, there was no such thing as all splits and hash wars and etc. And there's the same thing in this. Like there's fiat currencies slowly overtake each other with their geopolitical situation, but that's completely different to how it happens in crypto, which is all driven by technology and memes online and people debating and podcasts and all this like different stuff. So I don't know what you make of crypto going into 2025. If you have any predictions for the year for us,
well, yeah, I mean, I have
etc.
Totally, I have many predictions, but yeah, I guess since you mentioned Trump there at the end, in my humble opinion, I didn't know what was going to happen. I'm very glad Trump won. I think that Trump is very good for crypto, certainly in the U.S. It's like, should I be in the U.S.? If Kamala Harris won, I'm really not sure I should be in the U.S. Trump winning, I think this is arguably certainly one of the best countries to be in, possibly the best moving forward, because Trump is apparently very pro-crypto. He's surrounded by other pro-crypto people. He's made unbelievably positive statements. The idea has been thrown around that American blockchains may have zero capital blockchain in America. Nothing could be better. Zero capital gains tax for Americans, or whatever the deal. Low taxes, that sort of idea, that'd be unbelievable. That would be awesome. I'm very bullish on that. So let's see what happens there. I'm optimistic. I'm not a pessimist at all. I'm very bullish on Trump's involvement in crypto. Let's just see what happens. Secondly, the particulars, you mentioned ETH and SOL there. I have of the opinion that Ethereum never made technical sense. It's another one of these that people buy in based on hype and FOMO. It never made any sense. This was never going to work. And the fundamental reason is it's a fundamentally impossible to parallelize architecture. It will never scale. Bitcoin technically could scale with no maximum block size. So they just ruined it, but it would scale. Solana, I don't know as much about. I did not like their white paper. I read it and I was like, I don't really agree with their technical decisions. However, what they're doing is they're acting like a startup company. They're willing to grow. They're willing to move. I don't agree with a lot of stuff going on there. However, if they're willing to grow, change, improve, learn, etc., that matters. And if they don't have fundamentally broken technology, which I can't vouch for, I don't know. I think Ethereum needs to be started over from scratch. But if Solana is not fundamentally broken, it could absolutely surpass Ethereum eventually. And I think they're on that trajectory from what I can tell. I'm not an expert on any of this stuff. I don't know Solana or Ethereum anywhere near as well. Maybe I will get to know them. And that's why I mentioned Solana earlier, because you know what? I don't know. I don't like Solana that much. I don't like the way they did it. But if they prove me wrong and simply succeed, if people start using that as electronic cash, I think that's really important. So let's just see what happens there. I don't think they made a lot of right choices. Let's just see. I'm open-minded. And as well as the other ones, I'm open-minded about anything else. But go ahead. I mean, I don't have any thoughts on the other ones, but I'm bullish on crypto as a whole for sure.
Okay. Any other, specific predictions or ideas you want to throw out there? 2025. Sometimes we do on the Christmas show, we sometimes do like a 10%er if you had something that was a 10% chance of happening this year. So kind of pretty bit of a long shot, but might just play out and you get mad reps.
Well, okay, so in that case, I have to say it's Earthbucks. Earthbucks is the 10% chance, right? I mean, let's just see what happens with Earthbucks. We just launched. It crashed while we're on the podcast. It's obviously very early days. Give me another year of working on Earthbucks and let's see what happens there. If Earthbucks fails, I'll switch to Bitcoin Cash. Okay?
Love it.
If it doesn't fail, we'll see.
Yeah. Can't ask for any more. All right, so we have our final segment here is message to the community, which we do on every show. It's just your chance, unguided or scripted or whatever, by my questioning, to just say whatever you think the BCH community or the listeners to the show needs to hear, as long or short as you like.
Sure, absolutely. So number one, good job maintaining this vision this whole time, because I do think that when I come back and I try to look at it with fresh eyes, I could never really have fresh eyes, but I truly did as best I could in 2024 to look at the ecosystem with fresh eyes. I think Bitcoin Cash is very well positioned, actually. You guys have essentially extracted various types of cancer from the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem with time. There's all these problems that have actually been extracted and removed. And the problems are gone. And you've got a mature foundation. As I've argued with Earthbucks, I think that there are theoretically advantages that might be outweighed by the maturity of the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem. You have mature software, you have mature node software, you have mature wallets, you have mature exchange support, things like this. All that stuff matters. You've gotten better organized as a community. You've got people working together to work on the node software and that sort of thing. Things are looking very good. So if I would say, I'm going to give you a brief summary of what I'm going to do moving forward with Bitcoin Cash, and specifically my advice in terms of technology and products. First of all, forget about the protocol. I know I said there's issues with the protocol. That's not a big deal right now. What I would say is let's start with the user experience side of things. Let's get a version of what I call EBX addresses, which are just email addresses working for Bitcoin Cash. And if you listen to me, it'll take me a while to explain the full idea. You should send to an email address. The server has the public key. It derives a new public key. You're giving all of your users end-to-end encryption if you do it this way, in a way that they're already familiar with. We start right there, because my vision for the ideal configuration of all this is with a different configuration of the network. If we start with email addresses, it sounds silly and it's not irrelevant. It matters a lot for the end user experience. They should have an email address. Everybody knows this. Everybody understands it. It has every technical property we want and need. Start there. The way that you should send Bitcoin Cash is to an email address. I will happily give documents, as well as a working proof of concept at earthbucks.com right now of how this works. We start there and we start thinking about the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem differently in terms of different types of nodes. We should regard mining pools long-term as the core nodes. That's a long-term vision. But we start bringing in this idea of email addresses, because if we start solving all of the product and user experiences around this, it is an intrinsically better user experience, better technically. It solves tons of issues to do it like this. And it's also backwards compatible with email, which, whether you like it or not, is not going anywhere. So I would just start there. That's my number one suggestion. We're going to start with email addresses. When I say we, I just mean I'm going to write this article. And if people are curious to follow my ideas about this, I'll put that out there and explain what I mean in detail. We start with that and we start rethinking about how the Bitcoin Cash network should work to optimize user experience for electronic cash more than tokens. Tokens are fine. I've got a lot of thoughts on tokens I'll share. Electronic cash first. That means you need to be able to spool up a website, accept Bitcoin Cash as payments on your website as easily as a child can make a Kool-Aid stand. Okay, electronic cash of the web. That's the top use case. That's what Bitcoin Cash should be. That's what I'm doing with Earthbucks too. They can both coexist. We can work on Bitcoin Cash is way more mature and has a much better chance of doing this. So those are my ideas. I'll write it down in detail and share it specifically for the Bitcoin Cash people. But that's where I would begin technically and in terms of product.
Okay, interesting. Well, I guess more to come on that, and I'll also be fascinated to see as you dig into some of the other stuff that's going on, whether you give that the thumbs up or not. I mean, maybe you like it a little bit, maybe you like it a lot, maybe it takes a while, maybe you hate it. I don't know, but it's you've got plenty of background to bring to the discussion, so that I'll be fascinated to hear about that. Okay. Our FundMe contributors that we got to shout out as we wind down the show: Majamali Marcelo, quote founding father; Molecular, the show we love; Erdogan Talk, economics writer; Milton Friedman, and at Cash Stamps, Keep Calm, and Bitcoin Cash. Thank you for sending in sats to fund the show. We also did a burn of Badger token. As I promised, I spent half a BCH and bought some Badger on Cauldron and then burned it. I'm really hoping that somebody else in the ecosystem who has any kind of income stream gives that a go. I don't know, don't really want to go into all the details now. I wrote some stuff about it in that post, but I think that would be a kind of an interesting experiment. The TVL has been going up. It's right now, let's just have a quick look on Tokenaut. It's already flipped Moria at like 115 or 117 TVL. So anyway, I think there's a seed to this that is worth looking into, but I just had to mention that. Our support appreciation, our donators, our patrons Ricky and HP, and our sponsors General Protocols. Check out bchbull.com. I hit rank number 1 on BCH Guru, which I just wanted to give myself a shout out because it's been super fun to play. I'm 7 out of 8 So I think Steve Thurmond is the only one who's beaten me, so maybe he's the real guru that you need to listen to. But on this show, we're always doing predictions and so forth, so you can't be popping off about that unless you have proof that you actually know what you're talking about. And now I've got it. And the Stockout FAQs and links are at bitcoincashpodcast.com. If you're new, listen to episode 85. If you're Ryan X Charles, don't bother, you already know all of it, I promise. Go to Celine.cash and try Celine Wallet. And our final shout outs for the show, starting with you, Ryan. Where can people find more of you? And anyone else you want to give a nod to?
Sure. So my website, ryanxcharles.com, has access to all of my social media. I'm most active on X, so you can find a link at my website or just type in Ryan_X_Charles on X. And of course, there's earthbucks.com if you're interested. You can start by mining for free. It's down right now. Okay, it's probably something I can fix quickly. Let's see what happens. But read the blog, because there's a lot of information about where I'm different than Bitcoin Cash. It's intentionally the same in some ways, but there's a lot of subtlety, just like you guys, Jet, thinking through exactly how it's, how would that? There's a lot of stuff like that. It's not, it's subtle, but very important differences. So just read the blog if you're curious to have more information. It's earthbucks.com/blog. But I'm most active on X. So if you pick one, just follow me on X and I'll share all information.
Okay, Jet, you're next up. Shout outs. Nothing. We've got a fresh year going here.
No, I do got one. This one is to my girlfriend's father's girlfriend, who got me a handsaw for Christmas, which very useful. I've been cutting a lot of hardwood pallets, and it's nice to not struggle.
Okay. All right. And my shout out, this always happens. I have like people that I'm like, I should give them a shout out, and then I completely forget to write it down, and I forget live on air. My shout out goes to everyone who had a really good New Year. It's my favorite holiday because basically the whole planet can celebrate it. It's not really related to religion or political stuff or whatever. Everybody just gets a fresh chance at like, okay, last year was good and let's join the new year. I'm Gregorian calendar maximalist. Don't mess around with the lunar calendar. Forget about any of that and just stick with the best calendar, the network effect. It's already got your back. So yeah, a bit of an esoteric shout out, I think, there, but that'll do it. Till next time, thanks for listening.
Tomorrow all the bags were gone. Easy drain my pay. I thank PCH for breaking through to show a better way. I send my funds across the globe to anyone in need. It's fast, it's fair, it's always there. A tool for secure.